It was a romance fueled by passion and secrecy. He was a smooth operator with a shady history.
A smooth guy who could say all the right things.
She, a beautiful singer with an angelic voice.
She sang with such grace and passion.
And a soft spot for bad boys.
She didn't want her family to know.
But their affair was cut short when one of them vanished into thin air.
This case was just twisted beyond belief.
Is this a crime of passion or the work of a cold-blooded criminal?
I think he is a sociopath.
He may not have shown his true cards to her, and when she found out, he dealt a big joker, and it was a violent one.
My brother just came to my house and told me that he killed his girlfriend.
Wednesday, June 16th, 2004, 7:25 p.m. It's a humid evening in Spartanburg, South Carolina. On the south side of town, two police officers pull up to an unassuming home in a quiet neighborhood. They're investigating a missing persons report filed by a woman who's been trying to get a hold of her niece for weeks.
Her aunt called in and wanted to perform a welfare check. And when police arrived, they end up forcing entry into the residence.
When officers set foot inside the home, a powerful stench overwhelms them. In the bedroom, they make a horrifying discovery.
There were dogs that had been there that obviously was pregnant and had puppies, and one has been there for probably a couple of weeks. They became malnourished, and some of them even died.
It's just a terrible scene to walk into.
When detectives saw the state of the house, that's when they started to take this case very seriously because they knew that nobody would leave their house or their pet in that state.
170 to dispatch.
But the officers can find no sign of the missing woman, dead or alive. The only thing investigators know for certain is the homeowner's name, Tamika Houston. Raised in South Carolina, Tamika Houston was eager to grab life by the reins.
Tamika was a cute, petite, 4'11", 125-pound dynamo. She had a very outgoing personality. She had a beautiful smile.
Full of life, full of life. She loved children, she loved animals. She was just a real people person.
She talked to family members and friends. They said she's one of the nicest people you can meet.
Tamika was also a church-going girl and never missed Sunday service.
Tamika was religious, and she tried to live by the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Tamika was also the star of the church choir.
She had a very unique sound, and it was a beautiful voice. She sang with such grace and passion.
She loved to sing. Her voice, just her size, 4'11", she had a strong voice. Very strong voice.
Though it wasn't just her kind heart and heavenly voice that attracted people to Tamika.
She was beautiful on the inside, on the outside. She was just always so sweet and friendly.
Friends and family believed Tamika's talent and good looks had her destined for stardom.
Tamika was trying to find herself. She just hadn't really figured out which direction she wanted to go in life professionally. And I think that she was hoping that maybe singing would be something that would lead her to the life she wanted.
As much as Tamika longed to be a professional singer, she was hesitant to leave Spartanburg in order to fulfill that dream. That's because in the summer of 2000, Tamika fell for a handsome bad boy, the rough, tough, and extremely charming Terrence Moss.
I was at my family's convenience store. I came out of the store and I was going to get on my motorcycle, and then she popped up and she said, "Do you have an extra helmet?" We went riding and we exchanged numbers and we started a relationship. Ever since that day.
He had a very large, outgoing personality. He's a bit of a character. Sometimes the way to a woman's heart is, if you can make her laugh, you can get in there. I think Terrence made his way into Tamika's heart with giggles and laughs.
Terrence and Tamika's love connection was intense from the get-go.
In the beginning of a relationship, there's always a honeymoon period. And everybody's on their best behavior. There's a lot of positive energy.
It was instant soulmate. Just the love that we shared between each other, you would have thought that we were married. We complemented each other very well.
That positive energy carried over into the bedroom.
Terrence and Tamika pretty much did what young people in their 20s do when they're dating. I think for Terrence, when he hooked up with Tamika, he had kind of gotten a little gem. He gets this beautiful, exotic woman.
She had a big heart and such a small body. That was a great attraction for me.
The sexual chemistry between Tamika and Terrence was undeniable. But apparently, some of Tamika's friends worried Terrence was trouble.
Terrence had previous involvement with law enforcement and with district attorney's offices, which is more commonly known as a record.
Tamika was willing to overlook Terrence's checkered past, but she feared her family might pressure her to break off the relationship if they ever found out about his criminal record.
So what do you got planned for today?
Nothing really.
Not really? Nothing?
I don't know that Tamika's family knew a whole lot about Terrence and Tamika's relationship because she wasn't really introducing him to all of her friends and family.
But keeping their romance on the down low proved difficult once Terrence moved in with Tamika and her trusty pit bull, Macy.
Well, I'm gonna go out with Gail and Jenny after work, okay? You go out with your friends tonight?
Yeah.
You don't have anything planned during the daytime?
Nah, I'm probably just gonna catch up with some sleep, honestly.
Terrence didn't work a lot. I think that led to some strain in the relationship. Tamika had to get up and go to work every day, pay the bills. There may not have been as much contribution from Terrence.
Terrence's behavior ultimately caused Tamika to question his fidelity.
When people start to not trust their partners, that can lead couples into a very unhealthy dynamic.
Where the hell you been?
The situation came to a head one night in 2004.
Every night you out, I'm so sick and tired of this.
And Tamika's rage sent Terrence over the edge.
Why are you yelling at me? I'm not yelling at
An altercation between Terrence and Tamika, and it got ugly.
She was ready to fight. And I snapped back and I punched her.
I'm not dealing with you, you stupid.
Dealing with what? Look, I run this. You remember that.
The incident prompted Tamika to press charges and Terrence to move out of the house. But making a clean break from Terrence would prove more difficult than Tamika ever imagined, especially once Terrence moved into an apartment just a few miles away. But as investigators survey the scene inside Tamika's home, they can't help but wonder, has Tamika skipped town of her own free will? Or has something more sinister transpired? The search for answers will lead investigators into a sordid web of lies, deceit, and the ultimate betrayal. When she met Terrence Moss, 20-year-old Tamika Houston thought she'd found the man of her dreams.
I'm not gonna do this anymore, Terrence.
But Terrence and Tamika's storybook romance had turned out to have a not-so-happy ending.
It was a tumultuous relationship. It was not all smooth sailing.
But Tamika's relationship woes paled in comparison to the horrific discovery police made inside her home in June 2004.
The house was in a state of disrepair. A dog had allegedly eaten one of the puppies.
Something she treasured and loved very much was dead. It goes from this is unusual to this is probably foul play.
Officer, what do you got?
Moments later, detectives are on the scene. Their first notion is that there's been a home invasion.
Any signs of forced entry?
No signs of forced entry. When we did our search, we did find the purse, though.
Her purse was still in the house, her driver's license, things that a woman normally takes with her when she's leaving home, all of that was still there.
Is that her cell phone?
That phone was with the purse.
Have you had a chance to take a look at it?
No, I had not.
That feeling starts to creep in that something's happened to Tamika. And we hope to God it's not the worst case scenario.
Confusing matters even more is that Tamika's car is nowhere to be found. Was it another clue to this case? Or could Tamika have left town intentionally to start a new life elsewhere?
If things weren't panning out like she expected, she could have easily decided to try to just get a new start, and she just left.
Want to take a look around?
Yeah.
But why would Tamika leave town without telling anyone?
In this particular case, police are trying to start An investigation 2 weeks after the fact. Lots of leads grow cold, witnesses forget things, so that definitely creates a problem.
Hoping to unravel this mystery, detectives reach out to family and friends. Most of them have no idea where Tamika might be.
Do you know what happened?
Not exactly. That's what we're here trying to figure out.
But one friend tells police that a few weeks earlier, Tamika came to see her.
I do like red. It's fun. Gives a little bit of pizzazz to it.
While she was there, she received a call.
Give me about 10 minutes. Okay, I'll be there. All right.
When Tamika hung up, she told her friend she had to run.
What's that about? Something good.
A few minutes later, a car pulled up outside.
Tamika got in, she waved goodbye to her friend, and they drove off.
She could look at him.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't think to look.
Investigators can't help but wonder if the driver of that car was Tamika's ex, Terrence Moss.
Boyfriends and husbands are persons of interest a high amount of the time because they are the perpetrator a disproportionately high amount of time.
Jealousy and anger can lead people to commit violence against one another. It's led to murders, disappearances, and definitely assaults.
The notion that Terrence might be responsible for Tamika's disappearance gains even more traction when investigators research the domestic assault charges Tamika filed against Terrence. Turns out they were set to square up in court in a matter of days.
You have a girlfriend and a boyfriend that's having a domestic dispute, so quite naturally the boyfriend is always the number one suspect.
On June 23rd, detectives bring Terrence down to the station for questioning.
You know Tamika Houston?
Yeah, I know Tamika.
When's the last time you saw her?
A couple weeks ago.
Terrence claims he's been distant from Tamika since she decided to press charges against him.
What happened a couple of weeks ago?
We had an argument.
An argument. Okay. When was the last time you saw Tamika Houston?
I already told you a couple weeks ago.
And that's it?
Yes.
And he adamantly said, I did nothing to harm this woman. I loved her. I didn't do anything, and I don't know where she is.
Police have their doubts. They grilled Terrence about the pending domestic violence charges.
We just got into a fight.
Did you hit her?
Yeah.
And the coincidental timing of Tamika's disappearance.
They had some domestic violence issues in the past, but he insisted that he was innocent.
With little cause to hold him, detectives tell Terrence he's free to go.
If you're lying to us, we're going to yank you back in here.
Meanwhile, CSIs process Tamika's house, searching for any physical evidence that might tie Terrence to her disappearance.
Investigators are looking for any evidence of her disappearance or murder. They would search the residence for blood stains, hair, or any other forensics information.
When the police searched, they were unable to find any information connecting Terrence to Tamika's disappearance.
But soon, a shocking phone call will lead detectives to the shores of a nearby lake and lead Tamika's friends and family to fear the worst.
As cold-blooded as you can get.
Okay, what is your name? I can't tell you that, ma'am, because the police will pick me up.
It's been almost 10 days since Tamika Houston was reported missing. Investigators have discovered that her ex-boyfriend, Terrence Moss, allegedly assaulted her and was due in court the same week Tamika went missing.
That was one of those things that had the police seriously intrigued as to could he have enough motive for her to be gone.
But Terrence is adamant he had nothing to do with Tamika's disappearance. And CSIs can find zero physical evidence linking him to any crime.
There's not really any hard evidence. We can't find where she's gone. We can't find where maybe a crime scene had been located. You don't have any signs of forced entry. There's no forensics evidence. So that doesn't give an investigator a whole lot to go on.
Whenever an adult goes missing, there's always speculation that maybe that person had a secret life. Maybe that person broke character and just departed from everything that they had been and just ran off.
She was a person that loved to just up and leave, but something was different about this time.
If Tamika had tried to put some miles between her and Terrence, she'd need money to do so. Investigators subpoena her credit cards and bank statements, but that only deepens the mystery.
Tamika had last used her debit card 2 days before she was last seen. There was no activity after that date.
Things weren't adding up to a free will vanishing. There was something wrong here, and there was probably something seriously wrong.
Fearing the worst, detectives begin checking local hospitals for any Jane Does that have recently been admitted. They also look to see if there are any 911 calls that could be related to Tamika's disappearance.
This is what I called you guys about.
In doing so, they make a discovery that stops them cold.
Spartanburg 911. My brother just came to my house, and he told me he killed his girlfriend and put her in Cleveland Park Lake.
Where does your brother live?
He stayed at the Barksdale.
Cleveland Park is located just a few miles from Tamika's home, as are the Barksdale apartments. But those aren't the only details that give investigators a pause.
He said he drowned her because something about he got drunk and she'd been cheating on him.
Okay, what is your name?
I can't tell you that, ma'am, because the police will pick me up.
Is it possible ex-boyfriend Terrance killed Tamika in a jealous rage and then dumped her body in Cleveland Park Lake?
I believe police were looking at Terrance as a possible suspect because there were so many similarities.
Given this startling new information, detectives execute a search of the area around Cleveland Park Lake.
Police officers dispatched cadaver dogs. They checked the shoreline. They even had rescue divers to go down and see if they could recover any bodies in the lake.
They searched the lake several times and they found nothing.
Then it also puts the department back to ground zero, not to mention it also leaves the family members and friends still in limbo.
Through it all, Terrance Moss maintains he isn't responsible for his ex-lover's mysterious disappearance.
Let them do what they wanted to do. Didn't find anything. I had nothing to hide. Told them thank you, and y'all wasting a lot of time.
Terrance loved Tamika unconditionally.
Still, more than a few people have their doubts about the veracity of Terrance's statement.
It would make sense that Terrance might be involved. They had had a rocky relationship, and sometimes love can make you do crazy things.
With the investigation at a stalemate, Tamika's family decides to take matters into their own hands. They post flyers around town, offering a reward for any information about Tamika.
I've checked woods, I've checked abandoned houses, I've checked lakes, I've checked dumpsters, I've checked landfills. I've been everywhere looking for my daughter.
The flyers trigger a flood of tips. Most are dead ends. But one caller claims to have recently spotted someone matching Tamika's description.
That tip raised hopes that Tamika was still alive and just a missing person.
We really appreciate you taking the time to come in.
No problem, no problem.
Investigators sit down with the man who called in the tip and slide him a photo of Tamika.
Well, this is our girl here. I'd like to take a look at her.
After police interviewed the man that said he saw a woman matching Tamika's description around town, he said it looked like one of his co-workers.
When I saw the flyer, I just thought, for sure.
But that's not her.
I know her girl looks just like her, but her name's not Tamika.
The tip ended up being a dead end.
With the clock ticking, investigators are beginning to lose hope of ever finding Tamika.
The longer the period is, the less chance of finding evidence or clues. It deteriorates or something may destroy it, or if there's foul play, then the individuals involved may clean up or remove the evidence.
But soon a new tip will come rolling in, and a single turn of a key will unlock the horrible truth about what really happened to Tamika Houston. Tamika Houston thought she'd found true love when she met Terrance Moss. But after a tumultuous relationship ending in a violent confrontation, Tamika filed assault charges against Terrance. Shortly after that, she vanished without a trace. And investigators are struggling to understand what happened.
There's not really any hard evidence. We can't find where she's gone. We can't find where maybe a crime scene had been located.
But investigators are much closer to finding Tamika than they realize. Police dispatchers receive a complaint about an abandoned car at the Barksdale apartment complex near Cleveland Park Lake, the same lake police had searched earlier.
The windows were rolled down. It looked like the car had been parked there several weeks because it had been weathered.
Investigators head over to the Barksdale, where they find an abandoned Honda Civic.
I got here, ran the license plate. It comes back to Tamika Houston.
Our missing girl.
That's her.
An abandoned vehicle turns out to match Tamika's car. You wonder if she was abducted, if the person may have dumped the car there. Investigators combed the vehicle. They did not find any kind of evidence of foul play or blood or gunpowder or anything.
They did, however, find a set of car keys that did not go to Tamika's car in the console.
There were 2 keys that went to a car. Those keys fit Fords made between the 1950s and 1980s. And then there were a couple other keys that looked like they went more to your standard residential type door locks.
Detectives tried the keys in every door at the Barksdale apartment complex to no avail. They also interviewed several residents who provide conflicting accounts.
While police were conducting the canvass of the apartment complex, they found an individual that saw 2 African-American men abandon the car in the parking lot.
But a second resident reports seeing a single African-American male park the vehicle there a while back. Investigators can't help but wonder if this was the work of their prime suspect, Terrence Moss. Or could someone else have possibly targeted Tamika Houston?
They were looking for anything that might lead them to clues on Tamika's disappearance.
Looking for answers, investigators turn once again to Tamika's friends and family. Speaking to her father, they begin to learn more about Tamika's volatile relationship with her ex-lover, Terrence Moss. Turns out, Tamika wasn't the only woman in Terrence's life.
He was married before he had even started dating Tamika.
According to Tamika's father, Terrence's wife wasn't happy about his relationship with Tamika, and one day she decided to pay her a visit.
This random woman shows up to Tamika's house. Turns out, she's his wife, Jennifer Moss.
Could Jennifer Moss have been so angry about her husband's relationship with Tamika that she murdered her in order to put an end to the affair?
Jennifer Moss allegedly confronted Tamika and said, "I'm going to kill you." She saw Tamika as some kind of threat.
He did have children with his wife. Terrence's children used to spend a lot of time with Tamika, which made Jennifer very angry.
For police, it's a stunning turn of events. They couldn't help but wonder if Jennifer had made good on her threats, but Terrence isn't so sure.
There were so many rumors, untruths, things that people just made up, things that people just pulled out of the sky.
Investigators decide it's time to get some answers. Wasting no time, they track down Jennifer and press her about her alleged threats and Tamika's disappearance.
Did you ever confront her, threaten to kill her?
Absolutely not. No.
Jennifer, did you have anything to do with her disappearance?
No, I did not.
Her and Tamika never had any encounter. That was all just gossip and rumors.
According to Jennifer, after learning he'd shacked up with Tamika, she'd filed for divorce. What's more, she claimed their problems involved much more than infidelity.
He was very violent. He had a temper.
Jennifer and I, had disputes and arguments. She may have had some bad things to say because our marriage ended bad.
According to Jennifer, Terrence simply wasn't worth the effort of attacking Tamika.
When the police talked to Jennifer, my ex-wife, they found that she was not a person of interest. As far as her and Tamika goes, no run-ins with each other, no exchanges, that's totally fabricated.
Given the allegations of abuse, coupled with the discovery of Tamika's car, investigators bring Terrence Moss in for another round of questioning. Terrence steadfastly maintains he had nothing to do with Tamika's disappearance.
I was just screaming on the inside. I was like, why won't y'all listen to me? Why won't y'all listen to me?
He was adamant about loving Tamika and adamant that he brought no harm to this girl.
Detectives tossed the keys they recovered from Tamika's car in front of Terrence.
Recognize those?
No. Should I?
They're your keys.
No, I've never seen those before.
In order to verify Terrence's claim, detectives head to his apartment.
They tried this key in every single door, and the keys did not fit.
Once again, detectives are unable to tie Terrence to Tamika's disappearance.
Terrence kept saying to me, I ain't no killer. I ain't no killer. I'm a guy who laughs and jokes around. Yes, I love the ladies, but no, I'm no killer.
He was just an innocent guy who got caught up in a bad situation and was wrongfully accused of something.
Having reached a dead end in their investigation, detectives decide to retrace their steps. They start again with the keys they found in Tamika's car.
They start going to the different local locksmiths to see if any of them may identify or recognize the key and can maybe give them some other kind of lead of where it would go to.
Finally, a small hardware store recognized the key.
Due to a marking that he put on his keys, he's able to look up in his logbooks.
Looked at that key and said, that key goes to the Fremont School Apartments.
It was an old schoolhouse that had recently been turned into apartments. I believe there were over 40 apartments.
Hey, how you doing?
Hello.
You the apartment manager?
I'm the apartment manager. Nice to meet you. Hi. Nice to meet you.
Detectives immediately head to the Fremont School Apartments and begin the painstaking process of inserting the key into each of the complex's 47 doors.
The investigators secured the area as they went and checked the doors to try to see if they could find the door that the key would work for.
Hours into the search, and investigators have tried 46 locks. None of them are a match.
Almost coming to the end of it, they actually kind of give up hope.
Find anything?
No, didn't fit any of those either.
But when investigators get to the 47th and final door, something miraculous happens.
We got it. This is it.
Just like a scene out of a movie, the key fit into the very last door of the building.
What they find on the other side will lead investigators to the darkness on the edge of town and the brutal truth about what happened to Tamika Houston.
What he did in this case was just twisted beyond belief.
It's now been more than 5 months since 24-year-old Tamika Houston vanished. After running down a slew of dead-end leads, investigators have made a startling discovery. A mysterious key found in Tamika's abandoned car is a match to a door in the Fremont School Apartments.
This is a big break in the case. Police will now try to find out who owns this apartment.
But the apartment is completely empty.
Clear. There was nobody in the apartment when the police got there.
It's empty.
Was this apartment leased?
Without a warrant, investigators can't formally search the place. They ask the landlord to pull the rental history on apartment 47.
This unit is vacant right now.
Who used to live here?
A Chris Hampton.
Investigators are taken aback. They've never heard of anyone named Chris Hampton throughout their extensive investigation.
The fact that there was a Christopher Hampton that did live in an apartment at that particular time throws another person of interest into the case at this point.
Tell you what we're going to do. We're going to post an officer here at the door, come back with a search warrant and forensics, and really do a thorough search.
Okay.
Detectives run a background check and quickly discover Chris Hampton is no stranger to law enforcement.
Chris Hampton was someone I would characterize as a thug.
He was a thief. A quiet thief, not a sneaky thief.
When the police actually went searching for this guy named Chris that everyone was talking about, he was in jail.
If Chris Hampton was in jail at the time Tamika went missing, then it's unlikely he had anything to do with her disappearance. However, a closer examination of Chris's records reveal he's only been in jail about 5 months, which means he was a free man at the time Tamika disappeared. So what exactly is his connection to Tamika?
Tamika's family did not know about Chris Hampton. A lot of her, family and friends didn't know about Chris Hampton.
But one of Tamika's close friends reveals that she and Chris had recently started dating.
Tamika may have went with Chris thinking that he could give her the safe haven to get away from Terrence. And he would be able to protect her and take care of her.
Police also learned Tamika had met Chris at the end of April 2004, when she and a friend attended his birthday party. From the moment they laid eyes on each other, they had an instant connection. Detectives decide it's time to talk to Chris Hampton.
Mr. Hampton, we need to speak to you about Tamika Houston.
What do y'all want to know?
What was your relationship with her?
Chris explains the relationship in one word.
Sex. It was sex.
Nothing else.
Nothing else.
Chris Hampton was a smooth operator. He could present himself to Tamika Houston as this suave, smooth guy who could say all the right things. And yet, the other Chris Hampton that he may not have shown her was a criminal.
It appears Tamika kept the true nature of her budding relationship with Chris a secret from friends and family.
Usually, family members know, their friends know, maybe even the aunt in Florida should have known. But the first time police heard about Chris Hampton's and Tamika Houston's relationship was from him.
When's the last time you saw her?
Investigators asked Chris if he had anything to do with Tamika's disappearance. Chris tells them he last saw Tamika on May 27, 2004, 18 days before she disappeared.
She came over, she asked me for some money, and that was it.
And you're gonna stick with that's the last time you saw her?
Yeah.
Why were your keys in her car?
Like I said, she came over, she asked me for some money, and that was it. It's the last time I saw her.
To investigators, Chris's claims seem suspicious. On January 10, 2005, they obtain a warrant to search Chris Hampton's apartment at the Fremont School Complex. A forensic team combs the place. It's not long before they uncover a curious bit of evidence.
They find a bleach stain, and to the naked eye, it just looks like a bleach stain on carpet.
When CSIs darken the room and spray the chemical luminol, they make a ghastly discovery.
It was found that this apartment was covered in blood.
That had been cleaned up, obviously. But they went and checked the floorboard and found blood in the subflooring of the apartment.
CSIs collect samples and compare them to DNA collected from Tamika's apartment.
It found that the blood was Tamika's blood. That would definitely move Mr. Hampton to the front of the line as far as suspects go.
But a suspect in what exactly? Detectives still don't know if Tamika is alive or dead.
The blood evidence found at Chris Hampton's apartment would not have been out of place. If she'd spent any time around him and they were in a relationship, it's quite possible that the blood could have gotten there in another way.
The blood evidence is enough to bring formal charges against Chris Hampton.
Based off the evidence, they had enough probable cause to have him arrested.
With charges pending, investigators question Chris again.
They confronted him with the evidence they had, obviously the blood that was found in his apartment.
You want to tell us the truth?
That's when Chris Hampton does a surprising about-face.
I know what happened.
I guess the guilt had ate him up, and he decided to come clean. He admitted that he'd actually been the one that killed Tamika.
We got into a fight. It got heated. And I hit her.
Tell us exactly how it happened.
Hello?
According to Chris, it all began on the afternoon of May 27, 2004.
Just give me about 10 minutes and I'll be out there. Okay.
After talking to Tamika on the phone, Chris picked her up at her friend's house. And they returned to his apartment, where Chris claims the two then had sex. Later that evening, while Chris was ironing a shirt, Tamika asked to borrow some money.
Baby, can I borrow $200?
You know, I'm gonna pretend like you didn't say that. That's what I'm gonna do. Pretend like you didn't say that at all.
Like I didn't.
His version is she was asking for money. He made it clear to Tamika he didn't have any money to give to her.
You dare ask me for money when you know I got kids, I got things to take care of?
He was going to provide for a child he had with another woman.
How do you keep putting your kids and me in
How
one?
dare you tell me that? Listen, this ain't love. This is not a relationship. Stay out of my business. Don't ask me for no money.
You know, you are such a sorry excuse of a man.
And in a flash of anger, he struck her with an iron.
She fell to the ground and I knew she was dead.
I'm not sure how one accidentally hit someone with the iron. I think it takes a lot of violent tendencies in order to think about throwing an iron at someone, particularly someone's head.
Why didn't you call an ambulance, somebody to come and try and help her?
I thought it was too late.
Had he done what you're supposed to do in an instance like that, taken her to the emergency room, number one, she may very well be alive, but he didn't. He put her in a closet, then he tried to clean up the crime scene.
After Tamika spent several hours hidden in his closet, Chris says he wrapped her body in a carpet, drove to some woods not far from Cleveland Park Lake, where he buried Tamika's body in a shallow makeshift grave.
It's also shocking that he could just murder her and dump her in a gravesite might come and trash. That disturbs me.
I think that Chris just snapped because he was angry with Tamika.
The guilt got to him, and I think it ate him up basically at that point, and he panics.
That evening, Chris Hampton leads investigators to the spot where he claims to have buried Tamika Houston.
For whatever reason, marked the grave with some twigs that he made into a cross.
A team from the coroner's office sets about the grim task of unearthing the body.
They want to make sure they get every piece of evidence they can. They find every bone they possibly can in that crime scene. Unfortunately, they could not find her head, where he had told them that he had went back to her body and had really dug it up. He originally thought that he was going to turn himself in, but decided not to. He had took her head and actually put it in a trash bin, and it was not found.
His actions are just so vile that it's hard to even wrap your brain around why somebody would do those kinds of things.
CSIs do find a piece of jawbone, which they cross-reference with Tamika's dental records.
There were dental records that were consistent with Tamika's, but there was also jewelry that was consistent with Tamika's.
Her family was holding on to hope. It was painful for them to hear that Tamika's body was found.
Knowing what happened to her, knowing that she was so disrespected even after she was gone, I think that has to be a very hurtful emotion for a family to experience.
Chris Hampton is booked on charges of murder. He maintains Tamika's death was an accident.
It's going to be hard for him to sell that he didn't mean to kill her. His actions were louder than words. Because his actions showed that he murdered her, meant for her never to be found, and probably would not have been found if it wasn't for finding out the keys and finding out the DNA in the apartment.
He went into a rage and killed me. That's what I feel in my heart.
But with no eyewitnesses to counter Chris's assertions, proving Tamika's death wasn't an accident could be harder than prosecutors imagined. Searching for answers in the Tamika Houston case, detectives have finally uncovered the truth. It seems that in an effort to protect herself from her allegedly abusive ex-boyfriend Terrence Moss, Tamika found herself in the arms of a lover with an even more violent streak. Career criminal Chris Hampton.
Tamika, obviously from the pattern that we're starting to see, had an interest in bad boys. And unfortunately, which led her to this violent individual.
When are you gonna make me a priority?
Oh, what priority? He may not have shown his true cards to her. And when she found out, he dealt the big joker. And it was a violent one.
Chris Hampton maintains Tamika's death was an accident. Prosecutors find Chris's claim dubious, but with no other eyewitnesses to refute his story, a murder conviction is by no means a slam dunk.
It was not necessarily murder. It could have been manslaughter. It could have been self-defense. It could have been an accident.
On April 3rd, 2006, the trial begins. Chris Hampton is led into Spartanburg Circuit Court in shackles. If convicted, Chris could face 30 years to life in prison. But before opening statements begin, Chris Hampton makes a surprise announcement.
He admitted that he killed Tamika Houston with malice aforethought.
He got angry. He meant to kill her, and he basically had an evil heart.
Chris didn't really see a way out and felt like it didn't matter. He was going to be punished for it anyway.
Fearful for his life, Chris begs the court for leniency, but the judge shows little mercy.
This particular judge listened to the facts, and he concluded that life without parole was the proper sentence. He will be in prison until he dies.
Even as Chris Hampton is carted off to prison, those closest to Tamika can't help but lament the bizarre chain of events that led to her murder.
I would just want to be able to see and look him in his eyes, in his face, and to tell him, like, you have no idea what you took from this world.
It makes you realize that you really never know people. When I first met Christopher Hampton, I never thought that he would be the reason that Tamika is not here with us today.
You never know who you're sleeping with. Tamika didn't know what Chris was capable of. She hadn't seen the dark side of his personality. And when she finally saw it, it was violent and it was lethal.
The call came in just after midnight, a broken whisper cutting through static, a voice trembling, barely audible, repeating the same 3 words over and over again. He's still here. Then the line went dead. No name, no address, no trace. Just a timestamp, June 14th, 1995, logged and buried like thousands of others in the archives of a city that never sleeps but forgets far too easily. By morning, the story had already begun to fade, swallowed by the noise of New York, sirens, traffic, headlines that screamed louder, crimes that bled fresher. But tucked inside a quiet neighborhood in Queens, behind a narrow brick house with peeling paint and a rusted mailbox that hadn't been opened in days, something had already gone terribly wrong. 23-year-old Emily Carter was supposed to be at work that morning. A receptionist at a midtown law firm, punctual, predictable, the kind of person who left notes on her fridge and called her mother every Sunday without fail. When she didn't show up, no one panicked. Not at first. People are late. Subways stall. Life happens. But by noon, her desk phone had rung 12 times unanswered. By 3, her manager had called her apartment. No answer. By 6, her mother was on a train into the city, a knot forming in her chest she couldn't explain. The front door was locked. No signs of forced entry. Inside, everything looked untouched, almost staged. A cup of coffee on the table, cold, untouched. A handbag on the couch. Her shoes still by the door. It was as if Emily had simply vanished into thin air between one breath and the next. But the detail that made investigators pause, the detail that didn't belong, was the faint smear of something dark along the hallway wall, too deliberate to ignore, too subtle to scream. Police labeled it a missing persons case. Routine. Standard procedure. But within 48 hours, it shifted. The neighbors began to talk. A man across the street reported hearing a sharp thud sometime after midnight. Another mentioned seeing a car idling outside for nearly an hour, headlights off. No license plate remembered. No faces seen. Just fragments, pieces that didn't quite fit but refused to go away. And then there was the call. That same call, logged but dismissed, suddenly resurfaced. The timestamp matched the window. The voice, distorted but unmistakably female, carried a panic that couldn't be staged. He's still here. 3 words that changed everything and nothing at all. Detectives pulled phone records, traced the origin, but the line had been routed through a payphone 3 blocks away from Emily's apartment. When they arrived, it was already gone, removed, replaced, wiped clean like it had never existed. No prints. No witnesses. Just another dead end in a case that was beginning to rot before it even had a chance to breathe. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. The search radius expanded, then contracted. Posters went up, then came down. Leads dried. Tips slowed. The city moved on. But inside that small house in Queens, time stayed frozen, locked in the moment Emily Carter disappeared without a sound. The case file thickened, then gathered dust. Detective Raymond Hale was the one who refused to let it go. 20 years on the force, a reputation for seeing what others missed, or maybe just refusing to look away when things stopped making sense. He kept coming back to the same question, the same 3 words echoing in his mind like a broken record. He's still here. Who was he? And where exactly was here? There were no signs of struggle. No blood. No body. Nothing that definitively pointed to violence. And yet everything felt wrong. Too clean. Too quiet. Like a scene carefully arranged to tell a lie. Hale started digging deeper into Emily's life. Not just the surface, the job, the routines, the friends, but the parts people don't talk about. The gaps. The silences. The things hidden behind polite smiles and casual conversations. And that's when the first crack appeared. Emily had a brother, Daniel Carter, older by 6 years. Moved out years ago, according to the family. Lived upstate. Limited contact. They weren't close, her mother said, eyes avoiding his, voice too quick, too rehearsed. He had his own life. But records told a different story. Daniel hadn't lived upstate. Not officially. No lease. No job records. No tax filings for over 3 years. It was as if he had simply slipped off the grid, quietly, deliberately, completely. And then came the second crack. A neighbor, an elderly woman who rarely left her porch, mentioned seeing a man entering Emily's house late at night on several occasions in the weeks before she vanished. Family, she assumed. He had a key. She didn't think it was important until she saw the photo. She pointed without hesitation. Daniel Carter. The timeline shifted instantly. What was once a quiet disappearance now pulsed with something darker, something closer, something that had been hiding in plain sight all along. Detectives issued a search for Daniel, but it was like chasing smoke. No bank activity. No sightings. No digital footprint. Every lead dissolved into nothing. And yet, the more they looked, the more it felt like he had never really left. Because then something impossible happened. A week after Emily disappeared, a neighbor reported hearing footsteps inside the Carter house. Not outside. Inside. Lights flickering. Shadows moving behind curtains that should have stayed still. Police responded immediately. They searched every room, every closet, every inch of the property. Nothing. No forced entry. No sign of anyone inside. Just silence. Thick, suffocating silence that seemed to press in from all sides. But they were too late. Or maybe they were exactly where they were supposed to be, just not seeing what they needed to see. Because hidden beneath layers of routine checks and surface-level searches, buried under assumptions and procedural blind spots, the truth was already there, waiting, patient, unmoving. And it would stay hidden. For years. For decades. Until one detail, one overlooked fragment, one family secret too heavy to stay buried, would finally crack the case wide open in a way no one saw coming. And when it did, it wouldn't just solve a cold case. It would shatter everything the Carter family thought they knew about themselves. And reveal a truth far more disturbing than anyone was prepared to face. The house didn't breathe anymore after that night. It just stood there, still, sealed, watching. Detectives came and went, their footsteps tracing the same paths, their questions circling the same empty spaces, but something had shifted, something subtle and deeply wrong, like the air itself had learned to hold its secrets tighter. And yet the reports kept coming in. Small things. Dismissible things. The kind of details that don't make headlines but refuse to disappear. A woman walking her dog at 2:17 a.m. claimed she saw a silhouette in the upstairs window of Emily Carter's house. Not a shadow cast from outside, but movement from within, slow, deliberate, as if someone was standing there, watching the street. She stopped, stared, waited for it to happen again. It didn't. By the time officers arrived, the house was dark. Empty. Exactly as it had been left. Another neighbor reported hearing running water, pipes rattling, the distinct echo of a faucet turned on and left to spill into silence. Again, police responded. Again, nothing. Dry sinks. Cold pipes. No evidence. No explanation. The official stance didn't change. Missing person. No confirmed foul play. But Detective Raymond Hale had stopped listening to official stances a long time ago. Because patterns don't lie, even when people do. And this pattern, it wasn't random. It was controlled. Intentional. Almost like someone was testing the edges, pushing just enough to be noticed, but never enough to be caught. And then Hale found the third crack. It was buried in a stack of utility records, gas, electric, water, mundane, overlooked, filed away without a second thought. But one number refused to align. The water usage at Emily's house hadn't dropped to 0 after her disappearance. It dipped, yes, but not enough. Not consistent with an empty home. There were fluctuations. Small spikes. Irregular, but real. Someone had been using water inside that house. Not every day. Not enough to raise alarms. But enough to matter. Hale pushed for a deeper search. Not the routine walkthrough. Not the quick sweep that checked boxes and closed files. He wanted walls opened, floors examined, spaces that weren't meant to be seen brought into the light. It took weeks of paperwork, resistance from superiors who saw a dead end where he saw a beginning, but eventually, the warrant came through. The team entered just after dawn. This time, they didn't rush. Every inch of the house was measured, documented, dismantled piece by piece. Floorboards lifted, panels removed. The kind of search that turns a home into a question waiting to be answered. And then they found it. Not hidden well, not buried deep, just overlooked. A narrow access panel in the hallway closet, painted the same color as the wall, edges worn just enough to suggest it had been opened before, recently. Too recently for a house that was supposed to be empty. Hale was the one who pulled it open. The smell hit first. Not the unmistakable stench of decay, nothing that obvious, nothing that clean, but something damp, stale, wrong. Air that hadn't moved in too long. Behind the panel was a crawl space. Tight, cramped, barely enough room for a person to move through, but not impossible, not unlivable. Flashlights cut through the darkness, beams shaking slightly as they adjusted to the space. Dust particles drifted like suspended time. And then footprints. Fresh. Not from the search team. Not from years ago. Recent. Clear. Someone had been inside. The crawl space stretched further than expected, running beneath the length of the house, a hidden corridor connecting rooms that, above ground, seemed completely separate. A design quirk, maybe, or something more deliberate. They moved carefully. And then they saw it. A blanket. Folded. Used. A plastic bottle. Half full. A flashlight. Batteries still warm. This wasn't a relic. This was current. Someone had been living there. Watching. Waiting. He's still here. The words didn't echo this time. They landed. Hard. The entire investigation flipped in an instant. This wasn't a disappearance that ended the night Emily Carter vanished. This was something that had continued. Quietly. Invisibly. Right beneath their feet. Hale ordered an immediate perimeter lockdown. Every exit covered. Every possible escape route sealed. Because if someone had been living inside those walls, there was a chance, just a chance, they were still there. The crawl space branched near the back of the house, narrowing into a passage that led toward the basement foundation. And at the end of it, barely visible, was another opening. Unlocked. They approached slowly, weapons drawn, breath shallow. The kind of silence that only exists when something is about to break. Hale pushed the door. It creaked open. Empty. But not abandoned. Because on the concrete floor, scratched into the dust with something sharp, were words. Uneven. Desperate. Repeated over and over again until the surface itself seemed to tremble with it. Don't trust him. Over and over. Layered. Obsessive. A warning. Or a confession. Or both. And then, just as quickly as the momentum surged, it collapsed again. No body. No suspect. No immediate answers. Just a space that proved one thing beyond doubt. Someone had been there long after Emily disappeared. And they didn't want to be found. The media caught wind within hours. Headlines exploded. Queen's cold case takes shocking turn. Secret crawl space discovered. Possible suspect lived inside victim's home. The story that had once faded into silence roared back to life. Louder, darker, more unsettling than before. But with attention came pressure. And with pressure came mistakes. Because while the world focused on the house, on the hidden space, on the idea of a phantom presence lurking just beneath the surface, Hale was looking somewhere else entirely. At the family. Because secrets don't grow in empty places. They root themselves in people. In relationships. In things left unsaid. Emily's mother stopped answering calls. Friends became distant. And Daniel Carter, still missing, still untraceable, became more than just a person of interest. He became the center of everything. But there was a problem. No one could prove he had ever left. And no one could prove he was gone. Which meant one possibility, the one no one wanted to say out loud, was becoming harder and harder to ignore. Daniel Carter hadn't disappeared. He had stayed, hidden in plain sight, inside the walls, watching his sister, waiting for something, or someone. And whatever had happened that night in June 1995, it hadn't ended with a scream or a struggle or a body on the floor. It had continued, quietly, patiently, right beneath them, for days, maybe longer. And the most terrifying part wasn't just that he could have been there. It was that no one knew when or if he had finally left. Because some doors, once opened, don't just reveal what's behind them. They reveal how much you've missed. And how close the truth has been all along. The discovery should have been the turning point. A hidden crawl space. Fresh footprints. Signs of life where there should have been none. It should have cracked the case open, forced answers into the light. Instead, it did something worse. It multiplied the questions, stretched them thinner, sharper, until every possibility felt equally dangerous. Because if someone had been living inside that house, then they had been there the night Emily Carter vanished. And if they had been there that night, then they knew exactly what happened. Detective Raymond Hale didn't sleep. Not that night, not the nights that followed. The image replayed in his mind with relentless precision. The narrow corridor, the stale air, the scratched warning carved into dust like a voice that had no other way to speak. Don't trust him. It wasn't random. It wasn't madness. It was directed. Personal. But who was him? The answer felt obvious. Daniel Carter. And yet, nothing about this case had followed the obvious path. Forensic teams went back in, slower this time, more methodical. Every inch of the crawl space was processed. Fibers collected. Prints lifted. Air samples taken. They worked in silence, as if any sudden noise might shatter whatever fragile truth was hiding there. And then they found something that didn't belong. Wedged between two support beams, partially hidden under insulation, was a small object, plastic, worn, barely noticeable unless you were looking for what shouldn't be there. A cassette tape. Old. Dust-coated. The kind people stopped using years before the case ever went cold. No label. No markings. Just a strip of magnetic tape holding something that had waited, untouched for years. Hale held it like it might break. Because sometimes the smallest things carry the heaviest weight. They didn't play it at the scene. Too risky. Too many variables. Instead, it was sealed, logged, transported, every step documented, controlled. But the tension followed it, thick and electric, as if whatever was recorded inside was already pressing outward, demanding to be heard. Back at the precinct, they found an old player. The kind that clicks when you press play. The kind that makes you wait half a second before the sound begins. That half second felt like an eternity. Then, static. Low. Constant. The sound of something alive but unseen. And then a voice. Soft. Unsteady. Emily. There was no doubt. Her voice had a texture, gentle, careful, the kind that rarely rose above a certain volume. But here it was different. Tight. Controlled in a way that only happens when fear is being forced into silence. I know you're there. A pause. Breathing. Not just hers. Another sound in the background, faint, rhythmic. Movement. Or maybe just the illusion of it. You think I don't hear you, she continued, quieter now. But I do. Every night. Every step. The room froze. No one spoke. No one moved. Because this wasn't a message left after the fact. This was happening in real time. Recorded while she was still inside that house. While something or someone was inside with her. The tape crackled. A soft thud in the distance. Then silence again. Stretched thin to the point of breaking. You shouldn't have come back, she whispered. Back. The word hit harder than anything else. Not a stranger. Not an intruder. Someone who had been there before. Someone she knew. The recording continued, fragments of sound layered over each other. Floorboards creaking, something brushing against a wall, the unmistakable tension of a space that was no longer safe. I told you to leave, Emily said, voice shaking now. You promised. Another pause. Longer this time. And then, a second voice. So faint it almost disappeared beneath the static. Mail. Close. Too close. You weren't supposed to find out. The tape cut abruptly after that. No struggle. No scream. Just a sudden, jarring end, like the moment had been severed before it could finish. The room stayed silent long after the tape stopped spinning. Because whatever had happened next wasn't recorded. Or wasn't meant to be. Hale leaned back slowly, eyes fixed on the machine as if it might start again on its own, as if the truth might rewind itself and play differently if he waited long enough. But it didn't. It never does. The implications settled in fast, heavy, unavoidable. Emily knew him. She had expected him. And he had come back. Daniel Carter was no longer just a missing person. He was the last known voice on a recording made inside a house where someone had been secretly living, watching, waiting. But there was still something wrong. Because if Daniel had been the one in the crawl space, if he had been there all along, then why leave the tape behind? Why leave the warning? Don't trust him. It didn't fit. Not cleanly. Not comfortably. Which meant one of two things. Either Daniel wasn't alone. Or the truth was more complicated than anyone was ready to accept. Hale requested a full audio analysis. Every frequency isolated. Every background noise dissected. Because sometimes the things people don't say are louder than the things they do. And that's when the fourth crack appeared. There was a second layer of sound embedded beneath the recording. Almost imperceptible. Not part of the original moment, but not added later either. Something that had existed in the environment itself. A pattern. 3 distinct knocks. Repeated at irregular intervals. Not random. Intentional. Like a signal. Or code. The analysts enhanced it, cleaned it, mapped it against known patterns. Morse code. Structural echoes. Environmental interference. Nothing matched, but the rhythm stayed consistent. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Pause. Over and over again. Hale listened to it on repeat, the sound drilling into his skull, demanding to be understood. Because patterns don't exist without purpose. And this one, it felt like communication. Not between Emily and the voice on the tape, but between something else. Something hidden. Something close. The possibility crept in slowly, unwelcome but persistent. What if the crawl space wasn't just a hiding place? What if it was part of something larger? A system. A way to move unseen. To listen. To respond. Hale went back to the blueprints of the house. Old records, city archives, anything that could explain the layout beneath the surface. At first glance, it was ordinary. Standard construction for the time. Nothing unusual. But then he noticed a discrepancy. A gap between the Carter house and the one next door. Too narrow to be significant on paper. Too consistent to be accidental. And when he overlaid the structural diagrams, aligning them piece by piece, the truth began to take shape. The crawl space didn't end at the Carter house. It connected. Not visibly. Not openly. But structurally, undeniably, it extended beyond the property line. Into the house next door. A house that, according to records, had been vacant for nearly 6 months before Emily disappeared. Vacant. Empty. Unwatched. The kind of place no one pays attention to. The kind of place someone could use without being seen. Hale didn't wait for approval this time. He moved. Because whatever had happened in 1995, it hadn't stayed contained within one house. It had spread. Quietly. Deliberately. Through walls no one thought to question. And if the answers were still there, if the truth had been hiding just out of reach all this time, then they weren't just looking for a missing person anymore. They were stepping into something that had been built to stay hidden. Something that had worked. For years. And might still be working now. The house next door didn't look like a secret. That was the first thing that felt wrong. It looked ordinary. Too ordinary. A faded exterior, windows clouded with dust, a mailbox hanging open like a mouth that hadn't spoken in months. No broken glass. No forced entry. No sign of decay beyond what time naturally leaves behind. If anything, it looked preserved.
Paused.
But empty houses lie. Detective Raymond Hale stood on the narrow strip of concrete between the two properties, staring at the side wall where, on paper, nothing existed. No doors. No access. Just brick and silence. And yet, beneath his feet, the layout told a different story. Beneath that wall ran the same hidden corridor, the same crawlspace that had already rewritten everything they thought they knew. If it connected, then someone had been moving between these two houses without ever stepping outside. Unseen. Unrecorded. Untouched by the world above. The warrant came faster this time. The discovery of the crawlspace, the tape, the voice, it was enough to justify breaking through whatever illusion of emptiness this second house was hiding behind. They entered just after sunset. The door wasn't locked. That detail alone shifted the air. Because vacant houses are locked. Secured. Forgotten maybe, but not open. This one was open. Like it had been waiting. Inside, the air felt different. Not stale like the Carter house. Not untouched. There was movement here, subtle, recent, undeniable. Dust had been disturbed. A faint trail through the living room carpet, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. Not footprints. More like a path worn by repetition. Someone had been walking the same route. Over and over again. The team spread out, methodical, controlled, but there was an edge now. A tension that hadn't been there before. Because this wasn't just a follow-up. This felt like proximity. Like they were getting close to something that didn't want to be found. The kitchen was clean. Too clean. Counters wiped down. Surfaces bare. Cabinets empty except for a single glass sitting upside down in the sink. No dust on it. No residue. Recently washed. Hale didn't touch it. Not yet. Because details mattered more when they weren't disturbed. The staircase creaked under their weight as they moved upstairs. Every sound echoed louder than it should have, bouncing off walls that seemed to listen. The first bedroom was empty. The second the same. But the third room stopped them. It wasn't empty.
It was staged.
Not like a home, not like a place someone lived, but like a space designed for observation. A single chair positioned near the window. Curtains drawn just enough to leave a narrow gap, perfect for looking out without being seen. On the floor beside the chair, a pair of binoculars. Old, scratched, but functional. And the angle of that window, it pointed directly at Emily Carter's bedroom. A straight line of sight. Unobstructed. Deliberate. Hale stepped closer, slow, controlled, the kind of movement you make when you already know something is wrong but haven't yet decided how bad it is. From that window, you could see everything.
The bed. The door.
The hallway beyond. Whoever had been sitting in that chair hadn't just been watching the house. They had been watching Emily. Closely. Consistently. For how long, no one could say. But long enough to know her routines. Long enough to understand her patterns. Long enough to wait. The realization settled in with a quiet violence. This wasn't random. This wasn't opportunity. This was preparation. And then Hale saw it. On the wall, just to the right of the window, faint at first glance but impossible to ignore once noticed marks.
Dozens of them.
Small, vertical lines, scratched into the paint in uneven clusters. Tallies.
Counting something. Days. Or nights.
He moved closer, tracing them with his eyes. Some were deeper than others. Some rushed. Some precise. But all of them intentional. And near the bottom, separate from the rest, was a different set of markings. Not lines. Words. Scratched harder. Angrier. Stay quiet. The same pressure. The same jagged edges. The same hand that had written in the crawl space. Don't trust him. The connection locked into place instantly. Whoever had been beneath the Carter house had also been here, moving between the two, watching from above, listening from below. A system. Not improvised. Not accidental. Built. Used. Maintained. And then abandoned. Or worse. Left behind. The team continued searching, deeper now. Faster. The pace shifting as the weight of the discovery pressed down harder with every step. Because this wasn't just evidence of presence. This was evidence of control. Someone had orchestrated this, designed it, used it to stay hidden in plain sight. And then Hale noticed something that didn't fit. The floor. Near the back wall of the room, the wooden boards didn't align perfectly. A slight elevation. Barely noticeable. The kind of imperfection most people would step over without a second thought. But Hale didn't step over it.
He stopped, knelt,
pressed his hand against the surface. Hollow. He signaled the team. Carefully, slowly, they pried the boards loose. And, beneath them, another space. Larger than the crawl space.
Deeper.
More deliberate. A hidden room. The air that escaped was colder. Not just in temperature, but in feeling, heavy, still, like it had been sealed away for too long. Flashlights cut through the darkness. And, this time, they didn't find signs of life. They found something worse. A mattress.
Stained. Old.
But not decayed. Preserved in a way that suggested it hadn't been abandoned as long as it should have been. Beside it, a small table. On the table, photographs.
Dozens of them. Scattered.
Some crumpled. Some torn. All of them the same subject. Emily. Walking to work. Standing at a bus stop. Unlocking her front door. Inside her own house. Different angles. Different distances. Some taken from the window upstairs. Some from inside. Inside. Hale didn't move.
Didn't speak.
Because the implications didn't need words. Whoever had done this hadn't just been watching Emily. They had been living around her. Above her. Beneath her. Inside her world, without her ever knowing. And Daniel Carter. He was still missing. Still unaccounted for. Still the only name that connected every piece. But the deeper they went, the less simple it became. Because obsession leaves patterns. Control leaves structure. But this felt like something else. Something layered. Something that didn't belong to just one person.
The tape.
The warning. The second voice. The coded knocks. And now this. A space designed not just to observe, but to contain. And the question that had been building since the moment Hale opened that first panel finally broke through, louder than anything else. What happened in this room? Because whatever it was, it didn't end cleanly. And it didn't stay hidden by accident. It stayed hidden because someone made sure it did. The room didn't feel abandoned. That was the first thing that refused to settle. It should have, every logical instinct said it should have, but something in the air resisted that conclusion. The mattress, the photographs, the narrow table placed just close enough to suggest routine, it all carried a presence that hadn't fully left. Like whoever had been here didn't disappear. They just stopped moving. Detective Raymond Hale stepped carefully into the hidden space, every footfall deliberate, every breath measured. The team followed, quieter than before, as if noise itself might trigger something buried too deep to predict. Flashlight beams swept across the walls, catching imperfections, scratches, faint discolorations that didn't immediately make sense. Then they began to, because the walls weren't just marked. They were layered. Beneath the surface paint, thin, uneven, hastily applied, there were older markings. Words carved deeper, partially hidden but still visible if you knew how to look. Hale moved closer, scraped gently at the edge of one. The paint flaked away. And underneath, more writing, different from the warnings upstairs. Less controlled, more frantic. Can't leave. Another section. He hears everything. And then, lower, closer to the mattress, almost worn away entirely. I tried. The room shifted again. Not a place of control. Not just observation. Something else. Something that blurred the line between watcher and trapped. Because whoever wrote those words wasn't in control. They were stuck. The narrative fractured. Until now, everything pointed to a single presence. One person moving between spaces, watching, waiting, orchestrating. But this introduced something unstable.
Fear.
Not from the outside. From within. Hale straightened slowly, eyes scanning the room again, this time with a different lens. Not looking for evidence of surveillance. Looking for evidence of confinement. And then he saw it. Near the base of the far wall, partially obscured by the table, was a metal ring bolted into the concrete floor. Rusted, but intact. Attached to it, nothing. But it didn't need to be attached to anything. Its purpose was obvious. And it changed everything. Because rings like that aren't for watching. They're for holding. The silence in the room thickened. No one spoke. Because the implication didn't need to be said out loud. Someone had been kept here. Not briefly. Not accidentally. Deliberately. And if the writing on the walls was any indication, they had been alive long enough to understand what was happening to them. Hale turned back toward the photographs, this time examining them more closely. At first glance, they all showed Emily. But the longer he looked, the more the pattern broke. Because not all of them were taken from a distance. Some were too close. Too intimate. Angles that couldn't have been captured from the upstairs window. Or the street. Or even the crawl space. These were taken from inside the house. Inside her space. Inside her life. One photo in particular stood out. Emily sitting on her couch, reading. The angle low. Hidden. Watching. But there was something else. In the corner of the frame, barely visible. A reflection. A shape. Not clear enough to identify. But unmistakably human. Someone was in the room with her. And she didn't know. Hale felt it then, that shift from investigation to something heavier. Something personal. Because this wasn't just about what happened to Emily Carter anymore. This was about how long it had been happening. And how close it had always been. The team cataloged everything. Photographs bagged. The mattress marked. The writings documented in full. Every inch of the room preserved for analysis. But even as procedure moved forward, the weight of the discovery pressed harder. Because there was still no body. No definitive moment where the story ended. Just fragments. Pieces of a timeline that refused to align cleanly. Until one of the officers called out, "Detective, over here." Hale turned. The voice came from the far corner of the room, near where the wall met the floor. One of the younger officers was kneeling, brushing away dust, revealing something embedded just beneath the surface. A seam.
Thin. Precise.
Too straight to be natural. Another hidden compartment.
Smaller this time. Tighter.
Almost sealed. Hale moved in. Together, they worked the edge open. It resisted at first. Then gave. With a sharp, hollow crack. The panel lifted. And inside,
there was no space.
No extension. No hidden corridor. Just a cavity. And within it, a box. Wooden.
Simple.
Unmarked. The kind of object that doesn't draw attention unless you already know it matters. Hale hesitated for the first time since entering the house. Because instinct doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. And right now, it was telling him this was the center. The point where everything converged. He opened it. Inside. Letters.
Dozens of them.
Folded.
Stacked.
Some yellowed with age. Others newer. Too new. The top one was addressed. Not to police. Not to anyone official. Just a name. Mom. Hale's chest tightened. Because that wasn't evidence left behind for investigators. That was something else entirely. Something never meant to be found. He unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was unmistakable. Emily's. "I didn't tell you everything." The words sat there, heavy, immediate. No build-up. No hesitation. Just truth, raw and unfiltered. He said it would stop if I stayed quiet. That it would be easier if I didn't fight. I tried to believe him. I really did. Hale's grip tightened slightly on the page. Because this wasn't fear anymore. This was resignation. I hear him at night. Not just in the walls. Closer. Like he's right behind me. Like he's waiting for me to notice. The air in the room felt thinner. Harder to breathe. I think he's been here longer than I thought. Longer than any of us thought. Any of us. Not just her. The line blurred again. I don't know if Daniel is trying to help me, or if he's part of it. Hale stopped reading. Just for a second. Because the name landed differently this time. Not as a suspect. Not as a presence hiding in the dark. But as something uncertain. unstable, caught in the same gravity as everything else. He continued, "If something happens to me, it won't be simple. It won't be just one person. It never was." The letter ended there. No signature. No date. Just a silence that felt louder than anything else in the room. Hale lowered the page slowly. Around him, the team stood frozen, waiting, watching, as if the next move would define everything that came after. Because now, there were too many pieces, too many contradictions. A hidden observer, a trapped voice, a brother who might be protector or participant, a second presence no one could identify, and a system that had existed long enough to blur every line between victim and perpetrator. The case wasn't just open anymore. It was unraveling. And whatever truth had been buried in 1995, it wasn't waiting to be discovered. It was waiting to be understood. Because some secrets don't stay hidden by accident. They stay hidden because no one is ready to see them clearly. The letter didn't feel like evidence. It felt like a fracture, one that split the case clean down the middle and exposed something far more unstable beneath it. Detective Raymond Hale read it again, slower this time, letting each word settle, pressing into the spaces between sentences where meaning tends to hide. "I don't know if Daniel is trying to help me or if he's part of it." That line refused to stay still. Because up until now, Daniel Carter had existed in a single dimension, absent, suspicious, possibly violent. But this complicated him. It introduced doubt where there had been direction. And in an investigation like this, doubt wasn't just inconvenient. It was dangerous. Hale looked back at the box. More letters remained. Some thinner, some thicker. Different folds, different pressures in the creases. Written over time, not all at once. A timeline. He picked up another. This one was shorter. The handwriting tighter, more controlled, like Emily had forced herself into calm. "He says the walls make it easier to hear everything. That the house was built this way. I don't believe him, but I don't know what's real anymore." Hale's jaw tightened. The walls. The crawl space. The connection between the houses. What had seemed like a modification might not have been. He reached for another letter. "I saw him today. Not in the walls. Not in the window. In the hallway. Just for a second." He smiled like nothing was wrong. No name. No clarity. Just him. And that ambiguity, it wasn't accidental. It meant something. Because Emily wasn't distinguishing between people anymore. Or she couldn't. Another letter. "I asked Daniel why he didn't leave. He said he couldn't. That it wouldn't let him." Hale froze. Wouldn't let him. The language shifted again. From person to something else. Not a clear subject. Not a defined threat. Just it. Something that existed beyond a single identity. And suddenly, the knocks on the tape came back. 3.
Pause.
3. A pattern. A signal. Not random. Communication. Not just between two people, but possibly more. The room seemed smaller now. Tighter. Like every answer they uncovered was compressing the space around them. Hale stood, pacing once across the narrow floor, mind moving faster than his body could follow. Because if the house itself was part of it, if the structure had been used, designed even to conceal movement, sound, presence, then this wasn't just about who. It was about how. How long had this been happening? And how many people had known? He turned back toward the team. "Check property records," he said, voice low but firm. "Not just ownership. Renovations. Structural permits. Anything that changes the layout." An officer nodded, already moving, because the assumption that this had been built by Daniel or even recently was starting to crack. And if it cracked completely, then the timeline stretched far beyond 1995. Far beyond Emily. Hale looked down at the letters again. Because there was still one question that hadn't been answered. Why hide them? If Emily wrote these, if she was aware, afraid, trying to make sense of what was happening, why seal them inside a wall? Unless she didn't put them there. The thought landed hard. Because it shifted agency. These weren't messages meant to be found. They were messages meant to be hidden, preserved. by someone else. Someone who wanted this story to survive, but not be discovered too soon. A delay. A controlled reveal. And that meant intent. Hale exhaled slowly, steadying himself against the weight of that realization. Because whoever had done this hadn't just acted in the moment. They had planned for the aftermath. Years into the future. The kind of thinking that doesn't come from panic. It comes from patience. And patience meant experience. The kind that doesn't start with one victim. Detective. The voice came from the doorway above. One of the officers, breath slightly uneven. We pulled the property files. Hale moved immediately, climbing out of the hidden room, up through the open floorboards, back into the dim light of the staged bedroom. The shift in space felt disorienting, like surfacing from something deeper than expected. The officer handed him a folder. Both houses, he said. Same original contractor. Built 1968. Hale flipped it open.
Scanned.
Then stopped. Because there it was. A name. The builder. The designer. The one who had created both structures side by side. A single project. A single vision. And, according to the records, a single owner. For the first 10 years. Before either property was ever sold. Hale felt the pieces begin to move again, slower now. Heavier, but more aligned than before. Because if the crawl space wasn't an addition, if it was original, then it wasn't designed to hide one person. It was designed to allow movement, observation, access. From the very beginning. This wasn't Daniel, Hale said quietly. The room stilled. Because that statement didn't just redirect suspicion. It removed the only clear suspect they had. And replaced him with something far less defined. Something older. Something buried beneath decades of normalcy. He used it, Hale continued. But he didn't build it. Which meant he found it.
Or he was shown.
The distinction mattered. Because one implied discovery. The other, inheritance. Hale looked back toward the open floor, toward the hidden room below, toward the letters that had waited years to be read. Emily had written about Daniel like he was trapped. Conflicted. Not fully in control. I asked Daniel why he didn't leave. That wasn't fear. Not entirely. That was confusion. And confusion doesn't come from strangers. It comes from people you think you know.
People who change.
Or reveal something they've been hiding. Hale's mind moved quickly now, retracing every step, every assumption, every conclusion that had been made too early. Daniel Carter hadn't vanished. Not in the way they thought. He had been there. Inside the house. Inside the walls. But not as the architect. As something else. A participant. Or a prisoner. And, if that was true, then the voice on the tape. You weren't supposed to find out. That line shifted again. Not a threat. Not entirely. More like a failure. A plan breaking. Something exposed too soon. Hale closed the file slowly. Because the case wasn't narrowing. It was expanding. Beyond a single night. Beyond a single victim. Into something that had existed long before Emily Carter ever picked up that phone and whispered into the dark. He's still here. The words echoed differently now. Not just a warning. Not just fear. But recognition. Because whoever he was, he didn't arrive that night. He had always been there. And Daniel, he didn't bring him into the house. He found him already waiting. The name in the property file didn't look dangerous. That was the unsettling part. It didn't carry weight, didn't trigger recognition, didn't echo through police databases or light up old case reports.
It was ordinary.
Quiet. The kind of name that disappears into paperwork and stays there. Arthur Bell. No criminal record. No investigations. No flags. Just a builder. A contractor who, in 1968, designed and constructed 2 neighboring houses in Queens and then lived in both. That detail didn't sit right. Detective Raymond Hale read it again, slower. Not owned both. Lived in both. Simultaneously. Separate addresses. Separate utilities. Separate identities tied to each property through staggered documentation that, at the time, passed as clerical inconsistency.
But now.
Now it looked intentional. A system. Even then, Hale leaned back slightly, the file open in his hands, every instinct sharpening at once. Because this wasn't just a lead. This was origin. And origins change everything. What happened to him? One of the officers asked quietly. Hale flipped the page. Sale records. 1978. Both properties transferred. Different buyers. No overlap. Clean exit. Too clean. No forwarding address, Hale muttered. No follow-up records. He just disappears. The room went still again. Because disappearing without a trace wasn't new to this case.
It was a pattern.
And patterns don't start in the middle. They start at the beginning. Hale closed the file. Run his name through everything, he said. Employment records, permits, tax filings, anything tied to construction in the area before or after 68. I want to know where he came from. And after? The officer asked. Hale didn't answer right away, because the truth was already forming in his mind. After didn't matter as much, because if Arthur Bell built the system, then part of him never left. The team moved quickly, energy shifting again, but this time it wasn't reactive. It was focused, directed, because for the first time the case had a spine, a structure that made the chaos begin to align. Hale walked back toward the window, the one with a direct view into Emily's bedroom, and stood where the chair had been positioned. He didn't sit. He just looked, because perspective matters. From here, everything was visible, predictable, controlled. He imagined it. Years ago, decades even, someone sitting in that exact spot, watching another life unfold across the narrow gap between houses, learning routines, mapping movement, understanding behavior down to the smallest detail. Not for a moment, not for an event, but over time.
Slow.
Patient. Methodical. And then building something beneath it. A second layer. Hidden.
Silent. Permanent.
Hale exhaled slowly. Because obsession like that doesn't disappear. It evolves. And if Daniel Carter had found that system, if he had discovered it by accident, then everything that followed could have been a reaction. A descent. Not a plan. But if he had been introduced to it, if someone had shown him, then the pattern continued. Passed down. Sustained. The difference between those two possibilities was everything. Because one meant Daniel was a victim of circumstance. The other meant he was part of something larger. Detective. Another voice. This time sharper.
Urgent.
Hale turned. The officer holding the folder from earlier was back, but now there was something different in his posture. Tension.
Focus.
We found something, he said. Hale stepped forward. What? The officer handed over a photocopy.
Old.
Grainy. A permit application. Dated 1967. Before construction began. Applicant. Arthur Bell. Purpose. Structural variance approval. Hale scanned the document quickly, eyes moving over technical language, zoning codes, compliance notes, then stopping. Because there it was. A single line buried in the middle of dense text. Subfloor ventilation and maintenance access corridors to be integrated between adjacent properties. Hale's grip tightened slightly. There it was. Not hidden. Not secret. Documented. Approved.
Signed.
The crawl space. The connection. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't improvised. It was intentional from the start. Approved by the city. Filed away. Forgotten. And no one questioned it. Because no one imagined what it could be used for. Hale lowered the paper slowly. Because now the system wasn't just physical. It was institutional. Overlooked. Normalized. Which made it even more dangerous. Ventilation. Hale repeated quietly. That's what they called it. The officer didn't respond. Didn't need to. Because they both understood what that meant. A justification. A cover. A reason that sounded ordinary enough to pass without scrutiny. But in practice, it created access. Movement. Observation points. Hidden pathways between homes that should have been separate. And once built, it would never be questioned again. Hale looked back toward the open floor, toward the hidden room beneath them. Because if Arthur Bell design this, then he didn't just build houses. He built a system of surveillance. And maybe something more. Detective, there's another thing. Hale turned again. This time, the hesitation in the officer's voice was different. Less about uncertainty.
More about impact.
What is it? The officer swallowed once. Bell wasn't alone. That landed harder than expected. Records show a second name tied to the project. Not as primary builder, but consultant. Hale stepped closer.
Who?
The officer handed over another page. This one thinner. Less detailed. But enough. A name. Partially obscured by time. Ink faded, edges worn. But still readable. Hale stared at it. Because something about it felt familiar. Not from the case. Not from the files. But from somewhere deeper. Somewhere older. A memory just out of reach. Where have I seen this before? Hale murmured. And then
it clicked.
Not in a report. Not in evidence. In the letters. He moved instantly, back toward the hidden room, dropping down through the open floor with a speed that broke the careful rhythm they had maintained until now. The box was still there. The letters still stacked. He flipped through them quickly. Page after page.
Scanning.
Searching. Until
there.
A single line. Almost missed the first time. I heard him say the name again last night. I don't think it's his real one. Hale's pulse sharpened. He looked back at the permit. Then at the letter. Same name. Or close enough. A variation. An alias. Or something else. Because if Emily heard that name, then someone inside that house had used it. Recently. Not decades ago.
Not as history.
As identity. Hale stood slowly, the pieces locking together in a way that didn't bring relief. Only wait. Because Arthur Bell hadn't just built the system. He had shared it.
Passed it. Or
continued it. Through someone else. And that meant whatever had started in 1968 was still alive in 1995. Still active. Still evolving. And Daniel Carter was never the beginning.
He was just the next one to step inside.
The name didn't let go. It stayed with Hale long after he climbed out of the hidden room, long after the letters were sealed again, long after the officers began moving through the house with renewed urgency. It echoed, not loudly, not clearly, but persistently, like something unfinished trying to complete itself. Because it didn't belong to the past. It had been spoken. Recently. Inside those walls. I heard him say the name again last night. Not decades ago. Not inherited through paperwork.
Heard.
Which meant whoever carried that name had been there. With Emily. With Daniel. Inside the system Arthur Bell had built. Hale stepped outside for the first time in hours, the cold night air cutting through the density that had settled in his lungs. The street looked normal. Quiet. A parked car. A distant siren. A porch light flickering 2 houses down. Nothing about it suggested what had been happening just feet away, beneath walls people walked past every day without a second thought. That was the design. Hide everything in plain sight.
Make it ordinary.
Make it invisible. Hale exhaled slowly, then turned back toward the Carter house. Because there was one place they hadn't fully re-examined. Not with this new understanding. Not with this new name. Emily's room. The original space. The center of it all. Inside, the house felt different now. Not just empty, but exposed. Like whatever had been hiding there had been disturbed, pushed out of its pattern, forced to retreat or adapt. Hale moved upstairs alone. No team. No noise. Just him. Because sometimes the smallest details only reveal themselves in silence. Emily's bedroom door creaked as he pushed it open. The same layout, the same stillness, the same sense that everything had stopped mid-motion and never resumed.
But now,
he wasn't looking at it as a crime scene. He was looking at it as part of a system. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him, and listened. At first, nothing. Then, something.
Faint.
So faint it barely registered. A soft, irregular tapping. Hale froze. 3 knocks.
Pause.
3 knocks. The same pattern. Not from outside. Not from the walls. From below. Directly beneath him. The floor. Every muscle in his body tightened at once, because that meant one thing. The system wasn't empty. Someone was still using it.
Now.
Hale moved slowly, crouching, placing his hand flat against the wooden floorboards. The vibration was subtle, but real. A signal. Repeating. Intentional. Not random noise. Not structural settling. Communication. His mind moved fast. If someone was down there, then they were close. Closer than anyone had been in decades. He stood, crossed the room in 2 steps, and pulled the door open. Downstairs, he said sharply. The team reacted instantly. Weapons up. Movement fast but controlled. Back, through the hallway. Through the closet. To the access panel. Still open. Still exposed. Hale dropped down first. No hesitation. The crawl space swallowed the light again, but this time it felt different. Not empty. Occupied. The tapping was louder now. Clearer. 3 knocks.
Pause.
3 knocks. Echoing through the narrow passage like a pulse. Police. Hale called out, voice cutting through the confined space. Identify yourself. The knocking stopped. Silence. Then,
a shift.
Movement. Not far. Not distant. Right there in the dark. Hale moved forward, faster now, ignoring the tightness of the space, the way the walls pressed in on both sides. The beam of his flashlight cut ahead, catching motion. A shadow. Gone in an instant. Stop, one of the officers shouted behind him. But it was already moving.
Retreating.
Not blindly. Familiar. Like it knew the path. Every turn. Every opening. Hale pushed harder, following the direction of the movement toward the branch that led to the second house. The air shifted again, colder, sharper, like something had just passed through. They reached the junction. And saw it. The second opening. The one that connected both houses. Still ajar. Still in use. Hale pushed through. Into the adjacent crawl space. The beam of his flashlight swept across the ground. Fresh marks.
Disturbed dust.
Recent movement. Not hours ago. Not days. Seconds. Spread out. Hale ordered. The team split, covering both directions, but the space narrowed quickly, funneling them toward the same endpoint. The hidden room. The one beneath the floorboards. They reached it almost simultaneously. The opening still exposed from earlier. The board still lifted.
And below. Darkness. Still. Silent.
Hale dropped down again. Faster this time. Weapon raised. Light cutting through the room. Empty. But not untouched. The mattress. Shifted. The table.
Moved.
The photographs.
Disturbed.
And the box. Open. Hale's pulse spiked. Because he knew immediately what that meant. Someone had been here. After them. Minutes. Maybe less. He moved to the box. Looked inside. The letters.
Not all of them. Gone.
Some still there. But others. Missing. Taken. Specifically. Not random. Not scattered. Chosen. Which meant whoever had been here knew what mattered. Knew what to remove. Knew what not to leave behind. Hale stood slowly, scanning the room again, sharper now, more focused, looking for anything else that had changed. And then,
he saw it.
On the wall.
Fresh.
Carved over the older markings.
Deeper.
Cleaner. Deliberate. A single line. I'm still here. The air in the room seemed to collapse inward. Because that wasn't old. That wasn't from 1995. That was now. A message. Left for them. Or left for someone else. Hale stepped closer, eyes locked on the carving, every instinct firing at once. Because this wasn't just survival. This was awareness. The person in the walls knew they were being investigated. Knew they were close. And instead of running, they stayed. Communicated. Responded. 3 knocks. A pattern. A code. A presence that refused to disappear. Hale turned slowly, scanning the corners of the room again, as if expecting the figure to still be there, just beyond the edge of light. But it wasn't. It had moved. Again. Slipped through the system, the way it was designed to.
Silent. Precise.
Untouchable.
For now.
But not invisible anymore. Not completely. Because the case had crossed a line. From past to present. From cold case to active. And whatever had started in 1968, whatever had taken Emily Carter in 1995, it wasn't finished. It was still happening. Still evolving. Still watching. And now, it was watching them back. The line between past and present didn't blur anymore. It snapped. What had once been a cold case, archived, distant, safely buried under time, was now breathing again, moving beneath their feet, responding in real time. Detective Raymond Hale stood in the hidden room, eyes fixed on the fresh carving burned into the wall. I'm still here, and understood something with absolute clarity. This wasn't a ghost. This wasn't a leftover trace. This was a person.
Alive.
Thinking.
Adapting.
And most dangerous of all, listening. The missing letters confirmed it. Whoever had been inside the crawlspace hadn't just stumbled onto the investigation. They had followed it. They knew where to go, what to take, what to leave behind. That wasn't panic. That was control. Hale turned sharply. Seal both houses. Every exit. Nobody in, nobody out. The order snapped the team into motion. Radios crackled. Footsteps thundered above. The quiet illusion shattered, replaced by urgency that spread room to room, floor to floor. But Hale didn't move right away. Because something still didn't sit right. If the intruder, if he, was still inside, why risk coming back? Why take the letters now? The investigation had already exposed everything. Unless they hadn't. Hale's eyes drifted back to the wall. The older messages. The frantic ones. Can't leave. He hears everything. I tried. And beneath them, the newest layer. I'm still here. Not I was. Not I came back.
Still.
Present. Continuous. That wasn't just a statement. It was a condition. Hale's breath slowed. Because suddenly, the question wasn't who is inside the walls. It was, who has never left? Detective. A voice from above.
Urgent.
Backyard now. Hale moved instantly, climbing up, pushing through the house, out the rear exit into the cold night air. Officers were already there, flashlights cutting across the narrow strip of land between the two houses. Fence line, one of them said, pointing. Hale followed the beam. There, at the base of the wooden fence separating the property from the alley. A gap. Not broken.
Not forced. Cut. Clean.
Deliberate. Recent. Whoever had been inside had an exit. And they used it. Hale stepped closer, crouching, examining the edges. Fresh splinters. No weathering. This wasn't an old escape route. This was prepared. Maintained. Another layer of the system. Another path no one had noticed. Units are sweeping the alley, an officer reported. Nothing yet. Hale nodded once, but his focus stayed on the gap. Because escape routes tell you something about intent. This wasn't someone trapped. This was someone who planned movement, who understood timing, who knew exactly when to disappear. And that meant they weren't improvising. They had done this before. Hale stood slowly, scanning the alley beyond the fence.
Dark.
Empty. But not random. It connected to a wider grid of back streets, service roads, places where movement could dissolve quickly if you knew where to go. If you had practiced. If you had done it enough times to make it instinct. Pulse surveillance, Hale said. Every camera within a 3-block radius. Street, traffic, private, everything. The order went out immediately. But even as it did, Hale knew the truth. Someone like this wouldn't be caught easily. Because someone like this had been invisible for years. Decades. And only now chose to be seen. That was the part that lingered. The part that didn't fit cleanly. Because the message, the knocking, the return to the house, none of it was necessary for survival. It was communication. Intentional. Directed. Not random. And that meant This wasn't just about hiding anymore. It was about control, about narrative, about deciding when the truth surfaced. Hale turned back toward the house, mind moving fast, retracing every piece, every step, every assumption. Arthur Bell built the system. A second name helped shape it. Daniel Carter found it, or was drawn into it. Emily discovered something she wasn't supposed to. And then, she disappeared. But not cleanly, not completely, because she left behind traces, letters, a recording, warnings. And now, something or someone was continuing that pattern, preserving parts, removing others, guiding what would be found.
And when?
Hale stopped walking, because the realization didn't come gradually. It hit hard. The letters weren't just hidden. They were curated, selected. Some left behind, some taken. That wasn't fear. That was editing, controlling the story, which meant whoever was inside the walls knew the truth. All of it. From the beginning. Detective. The voice came quieter this time. Measured. One of the forensic officers approached, holding a small evidence bag. We found this near the exit. Hale took it. Inside. A photograph.
Different from the others.
Not of Emily alone. This one showed two people, Emily and Daniel, standing together.
Close.
Not distant. Not strained. Normal. A moment frozen before everything fractured. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was what had been done to it. Across Daniel's face. A deep scratch. Violent. Repeated. Until the image itself was nearly destroyed. But Emily, untouched, preserved. Hale stared at it. Because that wasn't random damage. That was intent. Emotion. Directed. Someone wanted Daniel erased. But not Emily. Which meant whoever was still inside this system
didn't see them the same way.
Daniel wasn't the center. He was a problem. Or a threat. Or something that needed to be removed from the narrative entirely. And that shifted everything again. Because for the first time, the possibility became unavoidable. Daniel Carter wasn't the predator. He was interference. Something that disrupted whatever the system was meant to be. Something that wasn't supposed to stay. Hale looked back toward the dark opening beneath the house. Toward the crawl space. Toward the hidden room. Toward the walls that had carried voices, footsteps, secrets for decades. And for the first time, he saw it not as a place someone hid, but as a place someone maintained.
Lived in. Returned to.
Protected. The knocks. The messages. The movement. The control. This wasn't someone passing through. This was someone who belonged there. And if they belonged there, then they weren't just continuing the system. They were part of it. From the start. Or close enough that the difference no longer mattered. Hale's grip tightened slightly on the evidence bag. Because the case had crossed another line. Not just from past to present, but from unknown to intentional. Someone was shaping this investigation. From inside the shadows. Choosing what was seen. What was hidden. What was understood. And what remained just out of reach. And the most dangerous part, they weren't running. They were waiting. For something, or someone, to finally understand what had been there all along. The system wasn't just hiding people anymore.
It was choosing them.
That realization settled into Detective Raymond Hale with a quiet, suffocating certainty as he stood in the narrow alley behind the two houses, the photograph still in his hand, Daniel's face scratched out as if someone had tried to erase not just a person, but a role. Because that's what it felt like now. Roles. Not victims. Not suspects. Pieces. Positions within something larger, something designed to move without being seen. Hale looked up. The windows of both houses loomed above him, dark, silent, watching. And for the first time since the case reopened,
he felt it.
Not just the presence, but the awareness of being seen. They're still in the area, one of the officers said through the radio. No confirmed movement yet, but we've got units on the grid. Hale didn't respond immediately, because movement wasn't the question anymore. Patterns were. And the pattern had already revealed itself. 3 knocks.
Pause.
3 knocks. A signal. Not random. Not panic. Communication. Which meant there was a receiver. Someone listening. Someone responding. Someone who understood the language of the system. Hale turned back toward the house. "Bring in a signal analyst," he said. "I want to map that pattern against the building layout." The officer nodded, already moving. Because if the knocks weren't just noise, then they weren't just coming from anywhere. They were coming from somewhere specific. And if they could trace that, they might finally have a direction. Back inside, the hidden room had changed again.
Subtly.
Almost imperceptibly. But enough. The mattress had shifted slightly from where it had been left. The dust patterns disturbed. The air. Different. Hale dropped down into the crawl space again, slower this time, more deliberate. The team followed, but there was tension in their movements now, like they were stepping into something that could collapse at any moment. They reached the hidden room.
And stopped.
Because it wasn't empty anymore. Not exactly. The box was still open. The letters partially gone. But something new had been left behind. On the table. A single object.
Small.
Intentional.
A key.
Not old. Not rusted.
New.
Metal still reflecting the beam of the flashlight. Hale stared at it. Because it wasn't random. Nothing in this room was random. Every object had meaning. Every placement had purpose. Which meant this key was a message. He stepped forward slowly, reaching for it, but not touching it yet. Because in a system like this, touching something could mean more than moving it. It could mean accepting it, acknowledging it, entering the next phase. Hale glanced around the room again. The writings on the wall, the ring in the floor, the mattress, the photographs. And now,
the key.
This wasn't just surveillance anymore. It was interaction, response, an exchange. Someone was still actively participating in this system, and they had just handed over access. Hale finally picked up the key.
Cold. Solid. Real.
He turned it over in his hand and saw something etched into the side. A number. Not random. Not decorative. A designation. Like a label. Like a code. He looked up. "Where does this lead?" one of the officers asked. Hale didn't answer immediately. Because the answer wasn't obvious. Not yet. But it was implied. Hidden within the structure. Within the design. Within the system itself. He closed his hand around the key and said quietly, "Somewhere we haven't looked yet." The team moved quickly. Search expanded. Documents reviewed. Every door, every lock, every storage unit connected to both properties checked against the number etched into the key. And then, they found it. A small, unassuming door. In the basement. Behind an old shelving unit that hadn't been moved in years. Dust-covered. Ignored. The kind of thing people walk past without ever questioning. Until now. The number on the key matched the lock.
Exactly.
Hale approached slowly. Because whatever was behind that door had been waiting. He inserted the key. Turned it. The mechanism resisted at first. Then gave. A soft click. Then silence. Hale placed his hand on the handle.
Paused.
And opened the door. The space beyond wasn't large. But it was different. Not like the crawl space. Not like the hidden room. This was structured. Defined. Almost institutional. A narrow corridor. Concrete walls. A single light at the far end.
Dim.
Flickering. And at the end of that corridor, another door. Hale stepped inside. The team followed. But the moment they crossed the threshold, something shifted. The air felt controlled. Contained. Not like a hidden space, but like a system designed to isolate. Hale walked forward, every step echoing faintly against the concrete. Closer. Closer. Until he reached the second door. This one was different. Thicker. Reinforced. And there, on the surface, another marking. Not carved, but painted. Recently. The same phrase. "I'm still here." Hale stared at it. Because now it wasn't just a message. It was confirmation. They were in the right place. He reached for the handle. And for the first time in this entire investigation, he hesitated, because whatever was behind this door wasn't just hidden. It was preserved, guarded, maintained, over time. And when people preserve something, it's because they value it, or fear losing it. Hale pushed the thought aside, turned the handle, and opened the door. The room inside was dim, quiet, but not empty. There was something in the center. A chair. Simple. Metal. Bolted to the floor. And sitting in that chair was a figure. Still. Watching. Waiting. And for a moment, everything stopped, because the system had finally revealed its center. And it was no longer hiding. It was waiting. For them. The room felt too quiet for what it contained. Not empty. Not abandoned. But occupied in a way that drained the sound out of everything else, as if the walls themselves had decided silence was the only appropriate response to what stood in front of them. Detective Raymond Hale didn't move at first. Neither did the team behind him, because the figure in the chair didn't react. No sudden movement, no attempt to flee, no defensive posture, just stillness, absolute, deliberate stillness, like they had been waiting for this exact moment for a very long time. The beam of Hale's flashlight settled on the figure slowly, illuminating details piece by piece. Clothing, worn, layered, practical. Hands resting on the armrests. Shoulders slightly hunched. A head angled just enough to suggest awareness, but not resistance. And then, the face. Partially obscured at first, until Hale stepped closer. And saw it. Recognition. Not immediate, but undeniable. Daniel, someone behind him whispered. But Hale didn't answer, because something was wrong. Daniel Carter wasn't alone in that face. There was something else layered underneath. A tension, a familiarity that didn't fully align with the records, the photos, the assumptions that had been built around him for decades. And then it hit Hale. Not all at once, but in fragments. The posture, the stillness, the way the person in the chair watched them without moving. Not fear, not panic. Control. That wasn't Daniel. Not entirely. Hale lowered the flashlight slightly. "Who are you?" he asked. The voice in the room shifted. Subtle, but enough. A breath. A movement. Then, a reply. Quiet. Controlled. "I'm the one who stayed." The words landed with weight, because they weren't defensive. They weren't evasive. They were final. Hale didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied the figure more carefully now, letting the details settle into place. The hands. Calloused. Marked by years of something physical. The eyes. Alert. Aware. Watching everything. Not like someone caught. Like someone who had always been aware of being watched. And then, the figure spoke again. "I heard you coming." Hale's jaw tightened. "How long have you been here?" A pause. Not hesitation. Calculation. Long enough. The answer didn't satisfy. But it wasn't meant to, because answers weren't the goal anymore. Control was. Hale stepped closer, careful now, deliberate. Emily Carter. The name cut through the air like a trigger. And for the first time, the figure reacted. A flicker. A shift in the eyes. Not fear, but something closer to acknowledgement. "She shouldn't have found it," the figure said quietly. Hale's pulse slowed. Found what? Another pause. Longer this time. Then, the way it works. The room seemed to compress again, because now it wasn't just a person speaking. It was context, system, structure, meaning. Hale took another step. Arthur Bell built these houses. The figure nodded, slightly. Yes. You used them. Another nod. Yes. And Daniel? A pause. This one longer. He didn't understand it. That changed everything. Because it wasn't deflection. It was classification. Understanding versus misunderstanding. Which meant Daniel had been in the system, but not in control of it. Hale steadied his voice. And Emily? Silence. For a moment, The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the light above. Then, she saw too much. The words were quiet, but absolute. And once someone sees it, the figure leaned back slightly in the chair. They can't unsee it. Hale's grip tightened. What did you do to her? Another pause. But this time, the answer came differently. Not defensive. Not rehearsed. Honest. I tried to help her. The statement hung in the air. Hale's eyes narrowed. Help her do what? The figure looked up. Straight at him now. Fully.
Directly.
Understand. The word carried weight. Not as explanation, but as belief. Hale felt something shift again. Because this wasn't chaos. It wasn't madness. It was ideology. Something structured. Something that had justification. At least in the mind of the person speaking. And that was far more dangerous than anything else. Understand what? Hale pressed. The figure's expression didn't change. The system doesn't trap people, they said quietly. It reveals them. The words echoed. Not loudly, but deeply. Because they reframed everything. The crawl space. The walls. The hidden rooms. The observation. The control. Not as confinement, but as exposure. Hale shook his head slightly. The figure didn't hesitate. Yes. And Emily? She was part of it. That word again.
Part.
Not victim. Not target.
Part.
Hale stepped closer now. No, he said firmly. She was documenting it. She wrote letters. She tried to warn someone. A flicker. Something almost like a smile. She tried to control it, the figure said. Just like the rest of us. The statement landed differently. Because now the system wasn't just about watching. It was about influence. About participation. About choices made under pressure. Hale looked down briefly, then back up. Where is Daniel Carter? A long silence. Then, he left. Where? Another pause. Then, not far. The answer didn't satisfy. Because not far in this system could mean anything. Hale stepped closer. Tell me where he is. The figure looked at him for a long moment. And then, slowly, they stood. The team tensed immediately. But Hale didn't move. Because something in the posture told him. This wasn't an escape attempt. It was a transition. The figure walked toward the wall behind the chair. Pressed a hand against it. And then,
pushed.
A section of the wall shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to reveal. Another passage. Hale's breath caught slightly. Because he hadn't seen this. Not in any of the searches. Not in any of the maps. This was deeper. More concealed. The figure glanced back at him. And for the first time, there was something in their expression. Not fear. Not control. But certainty. He stayed where he understood. They said quietly. Some people do that. Hale looked at the passage. Then back at the figure. And understood something fundamental. This wasn't just about a house. Or a crime. Or even a system. It was about people choosing where they belong. And who they become inside that choice. The figure stepped aside. Leaving the passage open. Waiting. Hale didn't hesitate. He stepped forward. Into the darkness. Because whatever came next was no longer hidden. And whatever truth waited inside that final space would finally answer the question that had driven this entire investigation. Not just what happened to Emily Carter.
But why?
And who, in the end, decided that it had to stay buried for so long. The passage didn't feel like an exit. It felt like a decision. Darkness stretched ahead, dense and quiet, swallowing the narrow beam of Hale's flashlight the moment it crossed the threshold. Behind him, the team hesitated. One step away from safety, one step away from whatever truth had been waiting here long before they arrived. But Hale didn't stop. Because he could feel it now. Not just the structure. Not just the system. But something deeper. Something watching from the other side. He moved forward slowly, each step echoing faintly through the confined passage. The walls here were different. Older, rougher, less refined than the sections above. Not built for comfort. Not built for concealment alone. Built for movement. Built for continuity. The kind of space that doesn't begin or end, just connects. The air shifted as he advanced, slightly warmer, slightly heavier, carrying a faint scent that didn't belong underground. Hale paused, listened, then heard it.
A sound. Faint.
Breathing. Not his. Not the team's. Something else. From deeper inside. He tightened his grip on the flashlight and moved again, faster now, urgency rising beneath the surface of his control. The passage widened slightly, revealing an opening ahead, a larger space beyond the narrow corridor. And as he stepped into it, everything stopped, because the room wasn't empty. It was lived in. Not recently. Not temporarily. Continuously. A desk. A chair. Maps spread across the surface, hand-drawn, layered, detailed in ways that no official record had ever captured. Lines connecting houses, routes through walls, paths marked in ink, over and over again, refined with time. A system mapped out, not guessed, not discovered, studied. And at the center of it all, a name, repeated, underlined, highlighted. Not Daniel, not Emily, not Arthur Bell, a different name, the one from the permit, the one from the letter, the one that tied everything together. Hale stepped closer, eyes scanning the room, absorbing the magnitude of what he was seeing. This wasn't just observation. This was authorship. Someone had taken Bell's original design and expanded it, refined it, turned it into something far more complex, far more controlled, a living system. And then
he saw it.
On the far wall, a photograph, not old, not faded, recent, pinned carefully. At the center, Emily,
alive,
looking directly at the camera, not smiling, not afraid, aware. Hale's breath caught, because this photo was taken recently, very recently, which meant she hadn't just been part of the past. She had been here, in this system, long after 1995. And then, he noticed something else. A reflection. In the glass covering the photograph. A shape. Behind him. Hale turned instantly. But it was already moving.
Fast.
Too fast. A figure emerging from the shadows at the edge of the room. Not the one from the chair. Not the one who guided him here. Another presence.
Real.
Immediate. And, before Hale could fully react, the sound of a weapon being drawn echoed through the space. Drop it. The voice was steady, controlled, familiar. Hale froze, because he recognized it. Not from the case, not from records, but from somewhere deeper. From earlier. From the house. From the system. The figure stepped forward just enough for the light to catch their face. And Hale's entire understanding fractured again. Because this was Daniel Carter.
Alive.
Present. And no longer missing. But the expression on his face wasn't relief. Wasn't fear. It was something else. Something closer to resolve. You shouldn't have come this far, Daniel said quietly. Hale didn't move. You've been here the whole time. Daniel's grip on the weapon tightened slightly. Not the whole time. That distinction mattered. Then when
Hale asked,
Daniel hesitated. Just for a moment. Then, after. The word hung in the air. After Emily. After everything. Hale's mind raced. After what happened to her. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Because the answer wasn't simple. Wasn't clean. And then, he spoke. They told me it would stop. Hale's eyes narrowed.
Who?
Daniel's gaze shifted slightly. Toward the deeper darkness.
Toward the system.
The house, he said quietly. And that was the moment everything changed again. Because this wasn't just people anymore. This wasn't just behavior. This was belief. Daniel took a slow breath. I tried to leave, he continued. But every time I did, something brought me back. Hale didn't interrupt.
Because he could hear it now.
Not just fear, but something deeper. Conditioning. Dependency. Or something worse. Daniel's voice lowered. I didn't understand it at first, but Emily, she did. Hale's attention sharpened. What did she understand? Daniel looked at him directly. The system chooses who stays. Silence. Heavy. Absolute. And who leaves? Hale's mind locked onto that. Emily didn't leave, he said. Daniel shook his head slightly.
No.
A pause. She decided. The words landed with weight, because they reframed everything. Not disappearance. Not abduction.
Choice.
But that didn't explain the rest. The marks. The warnings. The recordings. Hale stepped forward slightly. Then why all this, he asked. The hiding. The signals. The message in the wall. Daniel's expression shifted. Subtle, but real. Because something else was still here. The room seemed to darken further, as if even the space itself reacted to that statement. Hale's voice dropped. What else? Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked past Hale, into the system, into the darkness beyond. And for the first time, his certainty cracked. Something that shouldn't have stayed. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was waiting, because whatever came next
was no longer about the past.
It was about what was still present, and still watching. The room didn't feel like it ended. It felt like it deepened. Detective Raymond Hale stood in the narrow space beyond the hidden system, the air heavier here, denser, as if the walls themselves had absorbed years of silence and were holding it in place, refusing to let it dissipate. Daniel Carter hadn't moved. Not since he spoke. Not since the words left his mouth. Something that shouldn't have stayed. That sentence lingered in the space between them, unresolved, unfinished, like a door left slightly open. Hale didn't lower his guard. Define something, he said, voice steady. Daniel's eyes flickered. Not to Hale,
not to the team,
but to the darkness behind them. That's not something you define, Daniel replied quietly. It's something you survive. The words carried weight. Not fear. Not hesitation. Experience. Hale studied him closely now, because something had changed. Daniel wasn't acting like a suspect anymore. Not like a victim either. He was acting like someone who had learned how to exist inside the system. Adapted to it. Maybe even depended on it. You said the system chooses who stays, Hale said. Explain that. Daniel exhaled slowly. Then, not everyone reacts the same way. A pause. Some people resist. Some break. Some disappear. His gaze hardened slightly. And some understand. Hale's grip tightened. And you? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Because the question wasn't simple. It wasn't just about identity. It was about alignment. About where he stood inside something that had been operating long before he ever entered it. I stayed, Daniel said finally. Not as a confession, but as a fact. Hale stepped forward slightly.
Why?
Another pause. Longer this time. Then, because I saw what happens when you don't. The words were quiet, but absolute. And for the first time, something shifted in Hale's perspective. Because this wasn't just fear anymore. It was knowledge. Learned. Experienced. Passed down. He looked around the room again. The maps. The photographs. The structure. The system. All of it designed not just to observe, but to influence. To shape behavior. To guide outcomes. Not by force, but by presence. Hale lowered his voice. Emily understood that too. Daniel's expression tightened slightly. Yes. And she tried to stop it. A beat. She tried to control it. Daniel shook his head once. That's where she was wrong. The statement landed hard. Because it wasn't cruel. It wasn't dismissive.
It was certain.
She thought she could change the system, Daniel continued. But the system doesn't change. Hale didn't respond immediately, because that kind of belief was dangerous. Not because it was right, but because it was absolute. And what about the recording? Hale asked. The tape. The voice. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. That wasn't supposed to be found. Why was it made? A long silence followed. Then, to prove something. Hale's eyes narrowed. To who? Daniel's gaze dropped briefly, then lifted again. To her. The answer felt incomplete. But it wasn't, because the implication was clear. Emily hadn't just been documenting fear. She had been part of a process, a test, or something even more structured. Hale stepped closer. Was she trying to expose you? Daniel didn't answer immediately, because the answer wasn't simple. She was trying to understand me, he said finally, and what I was becoming. That sentence shifted everything again, because now, this wasn't just about presence. It was about transformation, about change over time, about what the system did to people who stayed inside it too long. Hale's voice lowered. And what were you becoming? Daniel looked at him directly, and for the first time, there was something raw in his expression, something unguarded. I don't think I ever left. The words hung in the air, not metaphor,
not emotion,
but identity. Hale felt the weight of that, because if that was true, then everything Daniel had done, everything he believed, everything he claimed, wasn't something he entered. It was something he remained inside. All along. Hale took a slow breath, then asked the question that mattered most. Where is the one who built this? Silence. Thicker than before. Daniel didn't answer immediately, but this time, he didn't look at Hale. He looked past him, toward the deeper system, toward the darkness that stretched beyond the room. And then, he spoke. Not gone. Hale's pulse slowed. Then where? Daniel's voice dropped lower. Still watching. The room seemed to contract again, because that answer didn't just imply presence. It implied awareness,
control,
intent. Hale tightened his stance. Then we find them. Daniel shook his head slightly. You don't find it. A pause. You enter it. The distinction mattered. Because this wasn't a person anymore. This wasn't a suspect. This was something larger. A system. A structure. A presence that existed beyond one body. Hale turned slightly toward the passage behind him. Then back to Daniel. You're saying this isn't over. Daniel met his gaze.
No. A beat.
It's just beginning. And in that moment, somewhere deep inside the walls, a sound echoed.
Soft.
Measured. 3 knocks.
Pause.
3 knocks. The signal. The system. Still active. Still responding. Still. Watching. The knocks didn't come from one place. They came from everywhere. Or maybe nowhere at all. 3.
Pause.
3. The sound echoed through the structure, not as noise, but as confirmation. As if the system itself had acknowledged the moment, marking it, responding to it, adapting in real time. Detective Raymond Hale didn't move. Neither did Daniel Carter. But something had shifted.
The air.
The tension. The balance. Because that signal wasn't random anymore. It was active. And it was answering. Hale's voice lowered. Who's sending that? Daniel didn't answer immediately. His eyes tightened. Not with fear, but with recognition. That's not a who, he said quietly. Hale didn't look away. Then what is it? Daniel hesitated. Just for a moment. Then, a response. The word landed differently this time. Not abstract. Not theoretical. But direct. Intentional.
Alive.
Hale stepped slightly closer to Daniel. Response to what? Daniel's jaw tightened.
To us.
The room seemed to hold its breath. Because if that was true, then everything they had done since entering this system had already been noticed, already processed, already answered. Hale glanced back down the passage behind him, then forward again. Where is it coming from? Daniel shook his head slightly. You won't find it by following sound. Then how? Daniel looked at him directly. By following the pattern. Hale paused. Explain. Daniel exhaled slowly. And for the first time, he didn't sound certain, just aware. The system doesn't move randomly, he said. It reacts. Hale narrowed his eyes. Reacts to what? Daniel's gaze drifted slightly, toward the walls, toward the structure, toward something unseen. Presence, he said quietly. Attention. The word hung there, because it reframed everything. This wasn't just a hidden network. It was reactive. It responded to observation, to intrusion, to awareness. Hale's mind moved quickly. So the moment we entered, it noticed, Daniel finished. Silence followed. Heavy. Immediate. Because that meant they weren't just searching anymore. They were part of it. Hale turned slightly, then back. And Emily? Daniel's expression shifted. Subtle, but real. She knew. The answer wasn't surprising, but it still landed with weight. And that's why she recorded the tape, Hale said. Daniel nodded once. Not just to document. A pause. To trigger. The word hit harder than expected. Trigger what? Hale asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately, because this was where things became unstable, unpredictable, dangerous. Then, movement. The single word changed the temperature of the room, because movement in this system wasn't just physical. It was structural, behavioral, intentional. Hale's voice dropped. You're saying the tape was bait. Daniel didn't correct him, which meant
it was.
Hale thought back. The voice, the panic, the second presence. You weren't supposed to find out. Not a warning, not a threat, a reaction. Someone realizing the system had been disrupted. And now, they were adjusting. Hale turned slowly toward the passage behind him, then back to Daniel. So, every step we've taken, Daniel nodded, has been seen. The words didn't come with fear, just truth. Hale exhaled slowly, because now the investigation wasn't just progressing. It was being tracked, measured,
countered,
and possibly guided. Why lead us here?
Hale asked.
Daniel's expression tightened slightly. Because you were already close. Close to what? Daniel hesitated. Then, to the center. The room seemed to narrow again, because that word changed the direction of everything. Center. Not edge. Not perimeter.
But the core.
The point everything else connected to. Hale's eyes sharpened. And the key. Daniel didn't respond immediately, but his gaze flickered. Just once. Access, he said quietly. To what? Daniel's voice dropped lower. Everything. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was dense, pressurized, because now the implications were no longer abstract. They were immediate. If the key opened something, then they were standing at the threshold of the system's most protected layer. Hale felt it then. That shift. The faintest vibration beneath the floor. The sense that something was no longer waiting. It was moving. He raised his head slightly, listening. And then, he heard it. Not the knocks. Something else. Different. Closer. A sound like metal shifting.
Slow.
Controlled. Mechanical. From deeper inside the structure. Hale turned sharply toward the passage. Everyone. But he stopped. Because Daniel moved first. Not toward the sound, but toward the wall. Pressing his hand against it. Like he was checking something.
Confirming something.
And then, he spoke. Too late. Hale looked back at him. What does that mean? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped back slightly. Away from the wall. Away from the system. And for the first time, there was uncertainty in his expression. Not fear, but realization. They're closing it. The words landed with finality. Hale's pulse tightened. Closing what? Daniel looked at him.
Directly.
Everything. And then, from somewhere deeper inside the walls, a sound echoed. Louder this time.
Clear.
Defined. Final. Not a knock. Not a signal.
A shift.
The system was changing. And whatever was coming next was no longer passive. It was in motion. And it had just begun. The sound wasn't loud, but it was absolute. A deep, mechanical shift, like something massive had begun to move beneath the surface of everything they thought they understood. Detective Raymond Hale felt it in his bones. This was a noise. This was action. Behind him, the passage seemed to tighten, the air pressing in as if the structure itself had become aware of their presence, reacting not with silence, but with adjustment. Too late, Daniel had said. And now, it was becoming clear what he meant. Hale turned sharply. Everyone back, now. But even as he spoke, the team hesitated. Because the sound had already changed. The knocks were gone. The signals stopped. And, in their place, something else began. A low, continuous hum. Not coming from one direction, but everywhere. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, all of it.
Alive.
Or at least, engaged. Hale moved forward, ignoring the growing pressure in the space, pushing deeper into the passage they had just come through. The route felt different now, narrower, less forgiving, as if the system had begun to subtly reshape itself around their movement. Daniel, Hale called out, turning back. But Daniel wasn't where he had been. He was gone. Not running. Not fleeing.
Gone.
Hale's pulse spiked. Seal the exits, he barked into the radio. No one leaves until I say so. But as he spoke, a door slammed somewhere distant. Not in the house above. Not near the crawl space.
Deeper.
Inside the system. The sound echoed through the structure, like a punctuation mark. Hale froze. Because that wasn't random. That was intentional. Someone else had moved. And they had just locked something behind them. Detective, one of the officers said, voice tight, we've got movement, multiple directions. Where? Thermal, the officer hesitated. It's not stable. It's shifting. Hale's jaw tightened. Because that meant one thing. The system wasn't fixed. It was active, adaptive, and now, responsive to intrusion. He turned slowly. The passage behind him, then the one ahead, then the side connections. All directions, all possibilities, and none of them clear. Stay together, he said. But even as he gave the order, the team began to feel it. The separation, the subtle shift in positioning, the space between them, widening, like something was pulling the structure apart from within. Hale stepped into the larger hidden room again. But something was wrong. The maps on the table had changed. Not dramatically, not obviously, but enough. Lines redrawn, routes adjusted, paths erased, new ones added, and, at the center, a single marked point, highlighted. Hale moved closer, his eyes narrowing, because that point wasn't random. It was precise, measured, intentional, and it didn't represent a location. It represented a position, a convergence. Hale looked up. And there it is, he muttered. What? One of the officers asked. Hale didn't answer immediately, because he was connecting it. Everything. Arthur Bell's design. The permit. The ventilation system. The crawl space. The hidden rooms. The signal patterns. The knocks. Emily's letters. Daniel's presence.
The key.
The message. The shifting system. All of it pointed here. To this point. To this moment. This isn't just a structure, Hale said slowly. It's a map. The officer frowned. A map of what? Hale's eyes stayed fixed on the marked point. A system of movement. A pause. Inside people. The room went still. Because that wasn't a physical explanation. That was something deeper. More disturbing. The idea that the system didn't just connect spaces. It connected behavior. Hale stepped back slightly. Emily was trying to map it, he said. Daniel was trapped in it. A beat. And whoever is still inside. He didn't finish the sentence. Because the answer was already there. They weren't just hiding. They were navigating. The system wasn't static. It was a network. And someone was still moving through it. Hale turned suddenly. Find the convergence point, he ordered.
Now.
The team scattered, scanning walls, floors, markings, trying to interpret the map, overlaying it with a physical structure, searching for the place where everything aligned. And then, one of them spoke. Detective, here. Hale moved immediately. The officer pointed to a section of the wall. But this time, it wasn't marked. Not physically. Not visibly. But the structure felt different.
The air.
The pressure. The sound. This was it. Hale stepped closer, pressed his hand against the wall, and felt it. A subtle difference. A hollow space. But not empty. Active. He turned back slightly. Stand back.
The team moved.
Weapons ready. Hale took a breath. Then pushed. The wall shifted. Not forcefully. Not dramatically. But enough. And what lay beyond wasn't another room. Not exactly. It was larger.
Deeper.
And at the center was a figure.
Standing. Still.
Watching. But this time, it wasn't Daniel. And it wasn't the one from the chair. This one was different. Older.
Calmer.
And in control. The system had revealed its center again. But this time, it wasn't waiting. It was present. And it was watching them.